What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning into the Mishmash Podcast. Today, my guest is my buddy Jon Lamarsh, fellow AAU parent, sports dad, coffee guy, horror fan. We've got a lot that we're going to cover today. So
Awesome.
Appreciate you coming by.
Thank you for having me.
So usually I start with how, I know the guests and whatnot. And for us, we met through basketball, as a lot of people that I know. Your kids are multi-sport athletes? Just basketball?
Yeah, just basketball.
I did see Avery the other day. I think it was after one of Jackson's games. Dude, she shot up so much, man.
She did. She got big.
And she, but she looked super fit too. Like, is she doing like any sort of training, or like what's she up to on the athletics front?
Yep, she basketball for the school, for middle school, and for Ricky's Go Up Strong program. And then she's doing training with Ricky at Cheap Plug Arc Training. Ricky does a kids program where it's strength and agility, and she does that 3 days a week.
That's awesome. So do you also work out with Ricky? Because we're big Ricky fans in this house. He was actually on as a guest a couple months ago, which
was
really cool. Yeah, so we got to talk fitness and coaching and basketball, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I don't. I'll see him from time to time at the gym. Mm-hmm. I want to train with him because but some of the workouts that he does might be a little too intimidating for me.
Yeah. You know what though? I think what's cool about him and certain personal trainers is like, I mean, obviously if you're at the gym, you see all sorts of trainers, right? And you could just tell some of them are just going through the motions, but like Ricky's one of those ones that I think really rises or lowers the level to his clients and adjusts and adapts.
For sure.
I'm intimidated. I see what he does for himself, and I'm like, I don't think I'd be able to handle that. But I don't think he would fling us like right into the fire, you know?
Yeah, probably. And that's where I got to get over my fear. Like, Ricky's a great guy. He's really great with kids. I kept calling him like a kid whisperer because it's a gift to be able to handle young kids, especially. And he has a gift for that. But yeah, he's I think training wise, he'd push you, but not overboard where you'd never want to come back.
Right. And on the coaching front, it's funny. I've thought that too. Maybe not in those exact terms, but that's a perfect way to put it, because at least in my experience with Jackson playing for him, like, he really knows how to get the most and the best out of these kids.
Yep.
He does it always because they're kids and, it happens. But what I love, like, what really sets him apart for me is when they do come up short, whether it's an effort thing or an execution, like, he takes the time to communicate with them. So, like, if Jackson makes the wrong play, and this was more early on when he was still, like, learning, Ricky runs a lot of plays for their sets. And if Jackson was in the wrong spot or he made the wrong pass, he'd get pulled out, but not, thrown at the end of the bench and that's it for you. It's like, okay, let's talk. What could you have done better? What was the right play there? And then he's back in the game. And I think that's a great teaching tool, because a lot of times kids react in the moment and then they don't really learn from it. There's no connection made. So I like that, and I appreciate that he takes the time to instruct them, because I think he's building better basketball players that way.
100%. He coached we had a private team, Jersey Bucks, for Matthew, and we brought Ricky on board, and he was fantastic for that team. And it almost got to a point where I think he kind of felt like he couldn't bench Matthew because it was Matthew's team. Mm-hmm. And doing the clock, I turned to Ricky and I said, if you have to bench him, you bench him. You have to teach him a lesson. And,
right.
And then eventually, Ricky did, because it needed to happen. So, but then again, when he did, he made sure that Matthew understood what the message was and why it was done, and to correct his behavior.
But that also says a lot about you and your wife, April, right? You guys are great people. Like, we've met through basketball, tons of families and tons of parents and stuff. And for me, like, I've kind of learned by the example that a lot of those people set. Like, I want to be invisible at Sarah's games. Like, if I'm at an Aces game, if you see me or she's aware that I'm there, that's a problem for me. And I love talking to you guys about basketball and how you handle it with your kids, because I think we're on similar pages. Like, we're not reliving our own, pasts through them. It's about their development. It's about moving them forward. And the more, I feel like the more parents are present in that process, the more it detracts from their own kids' development and stuff. So I love hearing that. I mean, I don't love hearing that he was, getting benched, but I love the encouragement. And actually, so I've seen you in a number of different roles besides just, dad on the sideline. So I know you do the clock for a lot of the games and stuff.
Yep.
Are you still reffing? You were reffing at some point.
I was. I haven't in a while. But once the kid schedules calm down and I get more free time, yeah, I'll pick up reffing again.
Which is great. I mean, to talk about a thankless job. How did you wind up making the decision? Were you always into it, or was it something that came about through the kids?
So I also ref hockey.
Oh, wow.
Which I haven't done in a while as well. Last game I did, I wound up doing a 8U game, and one of the kids turned into me, and I fell. I wound up breaking a rib.
Oh, my God.
And then 3 days later, I got COVID. So I couldn't cough because of it.
Oh, man.
So that was interesting. But talking to Dan, who's the head ref, about reffing and everything, he told me that I should do it, so I gave it a shot, and I liked it. I really did. Just unfortunately, the scheduling isn't conducive to me doing it right now.
Right.
But yeah, it is pretty thankless, but I get a lot of access. I do like 2 miles a game, so
that's for basketball.
Yeah, for basketball.
Okay.
Yeah, when we actually like move with the play, like,
right?
Yeah. My watch tells me I did 2 miles, so.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Wait, Dan has sons that also ref with him, right? One of them was a hockey player.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's not reffing anymore, but his youngest son, Ryan, is reffing with him.
I've seen them from time to time, and it's funny, again, right? Like, so I'm not a coach primarily, but I've filled in for the travel teams, for AAU teams, and different things here or there. And the philosophy I always bring to the court is the same that I have with like the parenting side. Mm-hmm. Like, if the refs are aware that I'm there, I'm not doing a good job. Like, yep. I always laugh when I see these guys, and occasionally, a female coach, that are like riding the refs right out of the gate. It's like, what do you hope to accomplish here? What do you think is going to happen on the next 50-50 call when you've been nothing but a pain in the ass of this guy? So I like those guys specifically because they don't take shit from people. They make good calls. They're good refs, and so like I can appreciate not that they're all, phenomenal. There are a couple of guys that, like, for whatever reason, I'm not a huge fan of, but I appreciate by and large what they're all doing.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and like I always told my kids, talk to the ref like a human. If you don't agree with what they're saying, that's fine. Just ask why, like, what did you see? Because maybe he saw something that you think you didn't do, but you actually did. So just talk to them like a human. You go up there and you start screaming at them that wasn't a foul or this or that. They got your number, and if they don't give you a technical at some point in the game, I'm sure they will.
Right.
And if it's a call that's questionable, that like, yeah, maybe that was a foul, maybe that wasn't a foul, they're going to call it on you because you were busting their chops and you're condescending to them when, they're an adult, one, and you shouldn't be condescending to adult. And two, that's how you want to be, then that's, I'll teach you a lesson kind of thing.
100%. And I was just at my son's freshman basketball game on Saturday, and there's one kid that's on the team that is just very vocal. He's just an emotional kid in general. His ability to multitask, I was making the joke to Tim the other day. The kid comes down with a rebound, is avoiding defenders while staring directly at the referee and screaming at him at the top of his lungs, managing not to get the ball stripped. I've never seen such a display. He was like juggling all these different things. Yep. It was pretty wild. But that's one thing that I won't tolerate with the kids, with my own kids. I mean, listen, obviously, in all sports, nobody's perfect, whether it's an ump, a ref, whatever. Okay, there's going to be missed calls, wrong calls, or whatever. And yes, sometimes they do have an effect or an impact on the outcome of the game. But by and large, for every call you complain about, there's one that you got that you didn't say, anything about. And so with my kids, like, that's a zero tolerance policy. And like, I've noticed it, I think it's more certain teammates or certain teams, like other kids that are bitching about it, it starts to sort of bleed into them a little bit. But that's the thing that, like, I come down with, like, with the hammer of Thor, like, absolutely not. I don't want to hear it. Don't ever complain to the ref. Don't give them a dirty look. Nothing. Like, if you get a bad call, it's basketball, right? How many possessions are there over the course of a game in those 2 miles, right? That you're
right,
going?
Exactly.
Just move on to the next one.
That's it. Next play.
Right. And, it's the same thing where it's like, let's say your jump shot's not falling. Okay, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to sulk about it? No, you have to find a different way to score. Try to drive in and get fouls, score from the free throw line, move further out, whatever it is, find an alternative way to affect the game in a positive way. And so it's the same attitude that I have with the refs. If you have a ref that's calling all sorts of travels or just ridiculous things, understand that that's how this game is going to go and adjust yourself, because bitching to the ref about it's not going to accomplish anything, in my opinion.
Yep, the ref is never going to reverse his call because you said something to him, and he's not going to turn around and say, "Oh, you know what, man, that kid's right. Yeah, let me." It's not going to happen.
Right.
So just keep your mouth shut, or talk to him like a human. Say what happened, like what did you see, and then let him answer, and then move on.
Right. Well, I try. So it's been a really, really long journey, and I don't know for you as a dad, like that's something I wanted to explore, like because you have two kids in sports and one of each gender, right? So you've the girl dad side and the boy dad side. So that's something I wanted to get into in a little bit. But for me, like it's been hard navigating it in terms of trying to figure out how to push, how far to push, because well, let me ask this first: what are the aspirations that your kids have sports wise in general? Like, do they have ultimate goals that they're working towards, or is this just like something they do for fun? Like,
I don't think they have much as far as aspirations go. As far as sports, I think they're kind of settled into the fact that most people in this area aren't going anywhere with sports. They're certainly not putting in the work. I don't want to put them down. But it comes down to work. Like if you're working, and I always told my kids, hard work, work hard now so that you don't have to work hard in the future.
Yeah.
And it kind of just goes in one ear and out the other. And that's fine if that's how they want to be, fine.
And how old are they? Just for everybody listening.
Matthew will be 17 in March and Avery just turned 13 in November.
Right.
So, right. I'm trying to rationalize with 17 and a 13-year-old.
Right. But that's the difficulty of parenting. Like we have the experience and the understanding of consequences that they don't have yet.
Yeah.
They're putting a different value. This is what I'm seeing with so my oldest is turning 15 in a couple of days, and I see like it's more a value judgment. I'm valuing this free time that I want to spend doing this over putting in the extra work or whatever it happens to be. So I get it. It's definitely tough. It's not an enviable position for us to be in.
Nope. And Avery's really good at just yesing me to death. Like, okay, no matter what I tell her, okay. Whereas Matthew just doesn't want to hear anything. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about, and kind of leave me alone. So him, not that I handle more with kid gloves, but I tend to I've learned over the years to just keep my mouth shut unless I don't like what he's doing on the court. If he's being a bad teammate, if he's giving the refs an attitude, then I'll lose my mind.
Right.
But if he just is having a bad game, then I've learned to keep my mouth shut. And Avery, she's more of the attitude. So I feel like I'm constantly yelling at and getting the okay, I'll do better, and then it just
nothing. Right.
Yeah. But typical 13-year-old girl, I guess.
Right. Well, and that was the challenge that I had was, again, coming from like the knowledge standpoint, the background of like being able to see what was wrong and know how to fix it. But the problem is, and this is what I learned through trial and error, more error, I guess, than anything, was, that's not what they needed, especially when my kids were younger, like 10. They don't need to have a video breakdown on the drive home, highlighting every wrong play they made or whatever. and I'm fortunate to have great coaches for the kids, great trainers that are willing to talk to me about that sort of thing and, give their own perspective and whatnot. And I've learned I'm a big expertise guy. Like, I don't know anything. So if I find people who do know stuff, like I try to listen or at least take what they have, to offer and then sort of run it through my own lens. And when I realized that so many of these people in basketball were telling me, hey, back off, like be more of a cheerleader than anything else, I said, okay, maybe there's something to it. And I noticed not only because what scared me was I noticed that they were sort of losing the joy for basketball, and that freaked me out. And I realized I was like, oh shit, that's my fault. Like, so I needed to learn how to back off and just sort of, even if I had to chew holes through my tongue because I was so frustrated with how they played in that game, it was still better off not even commenting on it. And not to be like Pollyanna, like, oh, you played great, meanwhile they had 15 turnovers and 0 points, but more like not highlighting the faults, the flaws, the things they could have fixed. You know?
Yeah. Matthew just had a game on Friday where it was probably one of the best games I watched him play, and high school game. And however, he probably missed 5 to 7 layups.
That's tough.
But yeah, so he was frustrated about that. I said to him, "You're not the only one, because you guys as a team collectively probably missed 20 to 30 layups. But you can't harp on it. He had 4 or 5 steals. He was grabbing rebounds. So I said, you contributed in other ways. Like, forget it. The shots will fall. The layups, you'll make the layups, right? That's easy to correct. It's not like, trying to fix a 3-point shot.
Right.
That'll come. Don't worry about it. Just focus on you doing you and contributing elsewhere and winning the game, because ultimately it's a team sport, right? You're not out there by yourself. If you want to be an individual on the court, then go play golf or tennis or something. But
that's a great point.
Yeah, he and then I think once he calmed himself down, he definitely was much better. So I was glad to see him react positively for a change to it.
Right, but by the second or third layup, you were dying a little bit inside with each one, because
I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
Oh, it's such a killer thing, because it's like, I don't know, it's very frustrating, and so I try to keep focused. I try to make sure the kids keep focused on these 3 things, but it's what I really look for. It's the attitude, the effort, and the execution. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the execution's the most malleable, right? Because that's the layups, the jump shots, or whatever. So there's got to be wiggle room with that. So as long as the effort and the attitude, for me, are on point, I can live with, a bad game.
Yeah.
And I've learned too, like, I think it's important to know your kids, right? And so the problem was, like my daughter wears, Sarah, she's, very outgoing, like speaks her mind. There's nothing hidden there. The boys are more sort of reserved, quiet or whatever. And so like, they wouldn't be saying anything on the drive home. And like, that would piss me off, because I'm thinking like, oh my God, they just had these shit games and they don't care, blah, blah, blah. And I've come to learn, no, they did. They were so upset at themselves that they couldn't really process it. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to work through it. So again, like learning to just be like, hey, you'll get him next time, so, but I think that's good. And it's refreshing to hear another dad who is sort of like reflective enough and I don't know, confident enough in yourself to understand, hey, you know what? I need to adapt and adjust. And
And usually April's there to say, like, you're going a little too far. Well, you back off for a little bit.
In your defense, though, she could be pretty fiery, right? I've seen her. She's very impassioned about it. So.
And I'm like, stay on the yelling, eh?
Right. Right. No, it's not. And it's funny. I think the wives get more of a pass for getting on the refs than we do. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how they. I feel like most refs probably tune a lot of it out anyway, but I feel like they take it less personally if it's coming from the mom, because mom being protective.
If it's a repeat offender, then probably not so much. But if it's just a mom being a mom, random mom being a mom, it kind of tune it out.
Yeah, it's so bad.
Yeah, I try and focus when I was reffing. Try and focus on the kids and making sure that nobody's getting hurt and they're having a good time, because that's ultimately where it is, right? It's about the kids.
Yeah.
It's not about the parents. It's not about the coach who's out there to win his 7th youth championship in the world, and it's about the kids, and making sure that they're developing and turning into smart and good basketball players. So I drown everybody out. And in fact, there was a coach yelling at me one game. I didn't even realize he was yelling at me. And then the other ref yelled at him to stop yelling at me. I was like, I didn't even hear him. That's
awesome that you were able to tune it out. But
I don't pay attention to it. Hockey, the good thing is you don't hear anything.
Right.
I could barely hear. I reffed a game with my brother, and I could barely hear him blowing the whistle.
Oh wow! Do you have to wear like helmet?
Helmet. Yeah.
So,
but it's just so loud on the ice that it's tough to hear what's going on down at the other end.
Did you play hockey growing up, or how did you get to hockey?
Yeah,
wise?
I played growing up, and actually I still play now.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so that's my cardio for the week sometimes. But the men's league kind of gets intense. I get intense with the refs on the men's league because I know the rules. It's like, dude, like, it's this, and no, it's not, and you don't know the rules. I'm like, all right. It's too late in the evening to be arguing with you, but you're wrong.
Right.
Kind of thing.
And the stakes are a little worse, or a little higher, I would say, with hockey, because people can get hurt, much more so than with basketball. Basketball, it's always like freak stuff, rolling an ankle or whatever. Yeah. But hockey, I mean, I'm assuming there's no such thing as a no contact hockey.
It is. Right? Adult league that I'm in is a no contact league.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Up until 14U is really no contact.
Oh,
no
wow.
checking league. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So there's contact, but there's no checking.
Okay.
So what they're promoting is you can if you and somebody else are going for the puck and the guys along the boards, you can angle him into the boards. You can't throw your shoulder into him. So there's that respect. So you can't just, if guys in the open ice, you can't just lay your shoulder into him and send them to the hospital for a couple days. So
it's funny because Avery, the first thing that struck me about her was how tough she was. Like, she's such a great defender because she's got that energy. No hockey interest from her whatsoever, or?
My wife won't let the kids play hockey.
Oh, okay. I mean, listen, I get it. Like, Tim did one season of town. We played flag football forever in a regular flag league, but the town starts off with a flag league and then it moves to tackle from there. We made it through one season and that was it. Like, this dude, the sounds of, like, we went to I think Tim was on like the 7U team or 8U, whatever it was. We went to a 10 or 11U playoff game.
Yep.
And just the sounds of the collisions, my wife and I looked at each other. We were like, nope, basketball. Because they were already into basketball anyway. We were trying to just give them a taste of all different things. And yeah, I don't blame her.
Yeah, no, I don't blame her either. Unfortunately for me, like, I love hockey, but like, I've tried to push her into lacrosse.
Or even field hockey, right? Or is that also in the band?
No, I think field hockey would be good, but there's not really much for field hockey around here. Lacrosse is such a huge upcoming sport, and especially in the New Jersey area, Long Island. I mean, it's been massive forever.
Right.
And my niece plays lacrosse for Freehold Township, but like, that lacrosse would be a good sport for her because she's big, she's strong, she's physical, but she doesn't want to. She likes basketball. So
right. No. Well, and it's, again, your kids are both obviously fit, and this is a perfect segue, I guess, to get to the sort of meat and potatoes here of it all. So you and I individually and separately sort of started these parallel nutrition and fitness journeys more or less around the same time. But before we get specifically into that,
unbeknownst to us,
right, which was really funny. So I guess we might as well, like, I didn't realize it until the Aces banquet. I think it was 2023. We were sitting and hanging out, and that was just how it sort of happened. Because I remember the year prior, it was funny. The food options were really good at the place, but I ate all the wrong things. And so that year, when we had the conversation, I was stoked because I was like, all right, redemption round. I'm going to make the right decisions this time. And it's almost like I don't know what your experience is like, but it's been like a different world. Like, did you ever see The Matrix?
Yes.
Back in the day? So it's like, it's like we took the pill that opened up, the reality. And I see, I don't know, I just see things differently now. What's your take on that in terms of, like...
Yeah. We went out to dinner Saturday night, and I'm at the restaurant, and no bread for me. I stopped drinking alcohol, so I had a non-alcoholic beer, which was Corona. I don't care for Corona, but it was something. I asked, actually, the funny thing, the bartender said that they have mocktails, and she can make whatever kind of mocktail I want. So I'm like, all right, great, I'll have a mocktail old fashioned. She's like, I don't know how I would make that. I was like, all right, just give me a Corona.
Right.
So, which was the only non-alcoholic option that they had. So I did that, no bread, and then I just had her and I split a piece of pork belly, and then I had a steak and sweet potato and some broccolini. So that I just kind of kept it basic, and concentrating on my protein and not falling into the, I'm going to just start pounding down bread and butter and, I'm going to use this as my cheat meal kind of thing. I've shied away from the cheat meals, because I feel personally that once I go down that rabbit hole, then I'm like, oh, well, I had it yesterday and I was okay, so I can have some today. And then next thing you know, I'm sitting there. I love Reese's peanut butter cups, especially the white chocolate ones. So I'll sit there and put down 7, 8 a day, and I'm back to where I started. So
right,
I definitely am making more conscious decisions and seeing things differently, more protein, more in a macro sense. I'm almost like. It's funny. I see meals as like, all right, that's a lot of protein. That's a lot of carbs, or so stuff like that.
So all right. So what is the origin story, right? So I'm assuming that we were in similar boats in terms of reaching a certain point where we just made that decision where we needed to do something. What for you? What did that look like?
So I started back in paying more attention to it. Like I would say February of 2022. I didn't really start my journey until April 15th of 2022. So February, I would work out once a week with my brother-in-law. And I would do weights at home, but he's like, that's not a workout. You
right.
need to go to the gym and get a workout in, which in hindsight now, I hate to say it, but he was right. What I was doing at home, it was nothing in comparison to what I do now at the gym. So, and then my next door neighbor is a big fitness guy. So I have him walking around all summer with no shirt on. And then I just I feel fat sitting next to you right now. So I really felt fat sitting next to him. So we got into ice bathing and stuff like that. So once I felt that, and I felt a little bit more energy, and then working out with my brother-in-law, then it was like, all right, now it's time to focus. And I knew if I didn't work out first thing in the morning, I wasn't going to do it at all. So I made myself get up every morning and do it. And then almost 2 years later, here I am.
Dude, you look great.
Thank you. Yeah. It's it's a work in progress. So and I'm fighting father time. It's tough. So, but I have goals. Part of me being so selective too when I go out to dinner is because I've gotten into the mentality that my goals come first. I can splurge afterwards, but my focus is here. And then everything else is either a deterrent or it's going to help me get to my goals. So if it's in any means going to prohibit me, then it's not for me. Which is why I've been staying away from alcohol.
No, I can I can totally relate to that, and especially in terms of not just the goals, but sort of the challenges, especially in social settings, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know that it's necessarily a conscious factor in terms of keeping people where they are, in terms of making, unhealthy decisions or maintaining habits. But I know for me, once the ball really started to get rolling and I saw changes and I felt healthier and I felt better, I did have anxiety about oh shit. So the Aces banquet, I was like, I'm pretty sure they're going to that wasn't as bad because I knew there would be an array of stuff.
Yep.
But I had a guest on a couple of months ago who's a huge fitness and health guy. That's what he does. And that was one of the things that he talked about was that he recognizes that he is in charge of his own nutritional decisions and he will not leave those decisions up to someone else. So he takes it to the extent that if you invited him over to your house for a summer barbecue, he'll bring something that's healthy, that if there's nothing else for him to eat, at least he can eat that.
Yeah.
And that, and he admits that's more on the extreme end of it, but again, I don't blame him for that. I stopped eating what I consider bad stuff, right? So fast food, even Shake Shack, just really fatty, unhealthy, but really tasty stuff. When I started my journey in mid 2023, Sarah and I did a bunch of concerts between late 23 and basically the end of last year. And I had one really rough stretch that like messed me up as much mentally as it did physically, because we went down to Knoxville for a concert. We flew home the next day, and that night had another concert in Newark. And then the day after that had another concert back in Newark.
Oh, wow.
So 3 nights in a row, the only options I had for dinner, because you can't bring food into arenas and stadiums and stuff, was what they had available. And dude, it was awful. When I tell you there was nothing that I could have had that was remotely healthy, it sucked. And like, I felt bad. And it was really tough on the mental side of it, which I think is probably like the number one thing I do want us to get to, is the mental challenges that come with this. But like, that was tough because I do such a good job now of, planning ahead, right? So like if I'm in a no-win situation food wise, I'll try to, I'll eat whatever I can before I go out. And then this way, I don't feel the pressure to fall into it or whatever. Do you have like a similar tactic or whatever, or?
Yeah, more so at home. This year I've gotten really heavy into counting my calories and everything. Again, because I want to get to a certain point. So in terms of like body fat percentage, weight, everything, weight, body fat percentage, appearance. So I've been really calorie conscious. So I will, if I don't, I'll budget for certain things. If I feel like having, like for instance, dinner on Saturday, I budgeted for that about 1,000 calories, because I figured, between everything, it was going to be around 1,000 to 1,500. So I went lighter, morning and especially for lunch. I don't even think I ate lunch. Just so this way I could still, if I didn't meet my goal, I was a little bit over. And I do my best to not include the calories that I burn from exercising as part of my calories that I can consume. So that helps in focusing on that to get to where I have to get.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I've never been a fan of dieting in general. And I've people, if they've listened to multiple episodes here, probably sick of hearing me sort of like bitch about it. But to me, diets are short-term fixes, not long-term solutions, especially anything that's restrictive, right? So in my mind, our bodies need everything just in varying degrees, except for like, processed stuff like extra sugars and trans fats and all like the artificial stuff or whatever, but literally everything else, fats included, carbs, all of that. I'm not going to have any of this. It's what's the right proportion of it to have.
Moderation, right? That's
moderation. And then also like substitution even, right? So for example, like I'm Irish guy, right? So we were huge, like French fries, potatoes or whatever. Once I learned that like sweet potatoes, you mentioned earlier, like those are a much, much healthier complex carb option. That's the shift that I made. So I don't have fries. I try not to have fried food in general if I can help it. But if, whatever, if the kids want to have something, I throw sweet potato fries in instead. And is it that much better? I don't know. I couldn't break it down specifically, but it's certainly not worse than, the smiley fries or whatever the hell we used to have.
Yeah, for sure.
And then too, like, I guess looking at it from a macro standpoint, I think is important, right? Because calories are, it's just a energy number, right? It's what we're burning, and we have a certain number that we need. If we go over that, then we're probably putting weight on. If we come under that, that's, a shortage that could theoretically lead to weight loss. It just, again, it depends on what it's comprised of. And I say that because let's say your number is 3,000 calories. Well, you could get to 2,800 calories on white chocolate Reese's cups alone, right?
For sure.
And so the number itself would be fit, but obviously it's going to have a different impact, right? So that's where, when you mention like the macros and looking at your plate differently, like that's one of the big alterations that I've had is really, focusing on protein intake, number one, above anything else. And then for me, prioritizing vegetable intake, because vegetables are carbs. But for me, it's the nutrients. I feel fuller. Like I would rather load up, 2/3 of my plate with veggies and have most of the remaining space, if not all of it, with protein. And then I'll have like a grain on the side. But like I've really tried to cut out the unnecessary stuff, like, because again, let's say you have most people don't also look at serving sizes, right? They'll look and see a certain number on the back of a bag.
Yep.
200 calories for French fries, not realizing that it's like 6 French fries, and they go and take a handful or 2. So that's like 4 or 5 servings. And then most people are using ketchup or something else, right? So there's sugar, there's all kinds of extra shit that people don't realize goes, that goes into it. And so all of those things just compound and add up. And so, I think it's smart. I think it's a better approach to have the mentality that you have in terms of being critical of what's on your plate instead of just, I don't know, going at it. And
Yeah. That's how I was in December, right? It's the holidays, like, whatever. Like, I'll loosen things up. And sure enough, I gained 15 pounds between the end of November and December. But now it's like, all right, crunch time, get back to where you were, right? Because you don't want to be here. And getting back to the journey, funny thing was, I had said that my brother-in-law is a big guy. I mean, he's like 6'2", 215. I mean, he's built like a machine. And so I had said that I want to look like him. And April goes, you'll never look like him. And I know what she meant by it, but it was
still
like,
hurts. Yeah.
And then so then we started busting her chops and like, what do you mean by that? And she's like, well, you're petite. So I'm like, all right. So now I'm petite.
She hit you with the P word. Oh boy.
Yeah. So now I was like, you know what? I'm going to show you. So that I kind of use that negativity as part of my motivation. And I've become very disciplined in, I want to say, the last 2 years. Not that I wasn't before, but now I've become even more disciplined, I should say, is probably a better way of saying it, where, I'm razor focused. Like I've gotten to the point where I can let myself go a little bit like I did for the holidays, and then January comes and I'm right back into it. And, I'm down 10 pounds since the start of the year.
Oh, wow, already?
Yeah. Because like I was up. So when I started, I was 200 pounds, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like I have a beautiful wife. She looks great. I look like a fat slob. Like I got to do better. So that was it. I was working out, but I wasn't working out as hard. I was just working out to kind of like lose the weight. And from April to June, I had lost 30 pounds. So I was down to like 170, 168, I think I bottomed out at. So then we went on vacation, and a lot of people actually thought I was sick because I had gotten so skinny.
Right.
And so then I was like, all right, now I got to gain a little bit more weight. So that was a little bit too less. But now I filled out a little bit more, again, year 2. So I know that starting from where I started to where I am now has been huge difference, and I just can't go back. So like I said, I've been razor disciplined and really sort of impressed myself at how disciplined I've become.
Well, for what it's worth, I was super impressed. I guess it was 2 years ago when we were just discussing it and seeing like your commitment to the changes that you had made, seeing the excitement that you had about the changes you were looking to make or whatever. So it's a testament to your ability to stick to it, because that's the hardest part, I think.
Yeah. Discipline and developing the habits from the discipline and commitment. I mean, it's just been huge. And once you get into it and you start seeing the changes and that positivity has so much effect on a person's mentality, that like once you start seeing those changes, you're just like you're in a whole new world, and then you keep wanting more. So you're almost like you're chasing a carrot. Like you just keep wanting more.
Right. It sort of, it's like a positive feedback loop where it feeds back in on itself. I feel like this is where it's going to veer off into like a therapy session land here. But so for this conversation started randomly through messaging on Instagram. I don't even remember what the impetus was, but it was a relatively recent pickup of the conversation. And what blew me away was the parallels and the things that we were talking about. Like, you had no idea the experiences that I had. Yep. And so you're telling me these things and I'm like reading it going, holy shit, like I went through that exact same thing, to the point that I was at 201 with the most I ever weighed was 230. This was 2013, I think. And that was the start of, I guess, the mentality where I was like, holy shit, like I was turning 30 that year. And we had, I guess Sarah was like, she must have been only a couple of months old because she was August 2012. All I saw was a toddler and a baby. And I'm like, holy fuck, like I want to be around to see them and have their kids and, be able to play with them and just do all these things. And I mean, as mortifying as it is, I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to do back then. And there were a lot of, again, being the stay-at-home parent, I was doing drop-offs and pickups and stuff. And so I heard all of the moms talking about this C to 5K. It was Couch to 5K running program.
Yep, okay.
That they did it to lose the baby weight after they had the babies. And I looked at myself and I was like, well, I look like I'm 8 months pregnant. Like, fuck, maybe it'll work for me. And it did. I wound up losing a lot of weight. I got into running and that was great. It just wasn't sustainable for me in the long run because I didn't have the right mentality in place and I wasn't attacking it from the nutrition side, which, just to touch on that real quick, I think that's an important aspect of it is like all the working out, like the thing that breaks my heart is when I see people finally commit to making positive changes for themselves. More often than not, the first thing they do is sign up for a gym membership. And it sucks because they don't go in with a plan. They just sort of think, well, I'm just going to hop on the treadmill and that's going to fix this. Well, it's not really the fitness side of it that's the problem. It's the nutrition side, right? Yeah. 6-packs are made in the kitchen, not in the gym.
Yep.
And so, and saying nothing of the people watching it like Planet Fitness where, there's people on the treadmill walking like whatever the slowest possible setting is. I saw one lady with like a white coffee and she's drinking this thing while she's on the treadmill. I'm like, that has to be 1,000 calories in that cup. And, you're on your phone, like whatever. Yep. It's just a whole separate thing. But in terms of the parallels for us, when I started that journey, I was at 201, so right around where you were. And when that was in, I guess, June 1st of 2023. And then it was like December 9th or 10th of that year, I went for my physical and I was down to 168.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh shit. Like that was definitely too skinny for me. But I was, where I sort of leveled out was like 172-ish, right? So for me, that was just where everything sort of seemed to settle. And to speak to what you had said, like, that process, I was not expecting or anticipating the positivity coming back my way. I think, and it's funny, right? Of all the comments that I got, the one that threw me the most was, I guess some guy thought, you said people thought you were sick. One guy thought I was doing coke. I was like, oh, really? Like, I didn't know that was like a side effect of it or whatever. Like, I think more people would be cokeheads than
kidding.
That was the way. I said, no, but it was addicting. Like just getting those comments from people. And I don't know what your experience was like. This is what I was saying about the therapy side of it. But for me, I've always had appearance issues going back to when I was a kid, man. Like
Same.
Self-image issues, dysmorphic stuff like you wouldn't believe, where it's just like what other people are seeing is not what I'm seeing in the mirror. And so it was a weird adjustment for me to make that in 2023 was made more easy, or was a more easy transition because of all of that feedback. It was a steady stream of feedback and not all positive. Like there were some, I'm going to say like backhanded compliments or whatever, but I realized that in most of those instances, if not all of them, I was inadvertently making that person uncomfortable about themselves, right? Their own decisions or whatever, comments, it must be nice. You're probably eating lettuce leaves for, lunch and dinner or whatever. And rather than getting upset at it, like I just tried to take it where it was coming from and just, roll off. Did you have that too? Like people commenting or, making...
Well, the negative comments usually came from my wife. Again, her heart was in the right place, but just the comments were in the wrong place.
Right.
But she's been fantastic throughout this whole thing, especially when she started noticing the changes. She was like, she was blown away because I've been with her for 25 years. And for 23 of those years, I was basically a fat slob. So now she's starting to see, something more manly like. So she's been fantastic through that. So that was really it for the negativity. It's really key to have, in my opinion, to have a great support group. My brother-in-law has been fantastic.
Is that April's brother, or is that?
This is my sister's husband. He's been like my rock, basically. My next door neighbor, also another great rock that I've leaned on. I mean, it's fun. Unfortunately, he's moving now, but I like him and I like would very rarely talk on the phone, and now like we'll come back. He'll leave the gym and like he'll call me. He's like, "Dude, I just have a monster workout," or I'll give him a buzz like, "Dude, so that's been great." So having that Ricky has been another steady arm to lean on, like, firing ideas off of him. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? What should I do? So that has been fantastic. That support group is massively huge. My sister is another one that's been very supportive. She lost a lot of weight, probably too much too. I mean, she like people that I look sick. I mean, she really looks sick.
Right.
But her now we're doing our best to get our oldest brother to kind of change his habits, which he's slowly starting to do. So as I had a support group, now I'm being that support person and really focusing on the positivity again for the first time really in my life, because I'm usually a pessimist. So I'm always harping on the negative. Now where I'm like, all right, like you got this, like you can do this. Like it's a lot easier than you think. Focus on this, and like you'll just see the weight, fly off of you.
Right, because so much of it is habit based, right? So if you're able to make those small changes, and so it doesn't go unnoticed. 25 years, congratulations, man.
Thanks.
That's awesome. And clearly, she, if you've been together a quarter of a century, there was plenty of things that she found positive about you and liked, right? Like
I would hope so.
Yeah, I would think so too. And is it? I would guess it's more that she seems like she could be blunt and not in a negative way, but just like she calls it like she sees it, right? Like
she spent way too much time with me. I think that's what it. That's what.
And you mentioned her being in great shape. Like, is fitness an interest of her? Like, I ask because having that support system at home, or having someone who models a different, like a negative or unhealthy, lifestyle, can be a challenge too. Obviously she seems like she's in great shape or is into fitness. Is that something that's been of interest to her too, or like what's
a lot longer than me? She trains pretty much every day, and I want to say it probably started around the time she had Avery, where she felt like she just gained too much weight, and she was always skinny. When I first met her, I mean, maybe she's 6 feet tall, so maybe she was 120 pounds soaking wet, and that was like more in her modeling days. Now, she's I don't want to use this because I know she's going to take it the wrong way, but she's filled out nicely now, and she really is super fit. And so seeing that it was part of my aha moments, where, like I said before, like she's putting in a lot of work to look the way that she looks. Like the least I could do is look better and be better for her.
Right.
So that was I kind of used that as motivation, and that meant a lot to me, especially getting her positive feedback, because for most of the relationship, I didn't care about myself. Going back to your couch to 5K, I had started running also. I did a half marathon in 2016 in Philadelphia with my next door neighbor's wife. Her and I did it. That was a rough one. But then I did a half marathon in 2019, October of 2019. I did the Staten Island half.
Oh, that's brutal, dude. All the hills.
Yes, but the good thing about that was, and I hate running now, by the way. But the good thing about that was you could see the course, and I'm actually from Staten Island, so I know the area.
I didn't realize that. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So I could see the course. I knew majority of it was flat, but I knew the downhills. I knew the uphills were going to be really brutal.
Does it go up Victory at some point or no?
No, it goes. It might. I don't remember the starting point was Bay Street.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought it might go up Victory from Bay, which is
it goes right from the ferry terminal down. I don't remember. Again, 6 years ago, but I should remember. But I know you cut through Fort Wadsworth all the way down, Father Capodanno, and then you make the U-turn. So I knew that I wanted to get under 2 hours. So I really trained hard, and I created a playlist to. So I learned my lesson in Philadelphia that when the race starts, everybody is that gun goes off and everybody is at a sprint.
Right.
So, and by the third mile, I was gassed. So I knew that if I did that, I was going to be gassed. So I started with something just to get me amped, but slow. So I kept my pace, and actually I wound up coming under pace. So then I was like, all right, I got to pick it up. But now, once I got into the downhill part and the flat part of the race, I picked songs that were a little bit more upbeat, so that I knew. So I did my playlist based on that, and it helped a lot actually. The uphill part, it was more of a lot slower song, so that I would slow my pace down going up a hill, so I wouldn't get gassed. And I came in just over 2 hours, so I didn't meet my goal, but I was happy that I came in at 2:04.
which is still amazing, but
which I was very proud of. So I back then I was like, oh man, maybe I'll do a marathon. Now I'm like, there's zero shot I'm doing a marathon. I don't even want to walk or run 2 miles a day, let alone doing 26 at one shot. So, and I felt hungrier when I ran. So,
physically hungry or hungrier?
No, from a food perspective.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would run and then I would feel starving, but working out I don't have that same craving kind of feeling.
Right.
Whereas from running I did, and maybe it's just the type of exercise that you're doing. So that's also why I'm hesitant to start. I have to start introducing cardio. I probably will start slower than faster. Maybe on a 3.5 and with a big incline.
Right.
Which can just be as good as running flat.
And that's what I tell people too, cardio wise, really, I can't say that it's the best thing to do, but if you're going to do anything, especially at the gym, on the treadmill, just walking at a really good clip where you can just barely keep a conversation on an incline, the steepest you can go, you're going to burn more calories, you're going to really work your muscles more, and you get more out of the workout. So that's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, it was good. But then, so I had cut weight when I was running a lot because I was running a lot, and then, but I wasn't happy with myself.
Well, which is, that's the therapy part I'll get to too, right? In terms of the happiness and the sort of the self analytical aspects of it. I do have to ask though, and any bands or songs in particular that you remember from the playlist, or you just had themed, slower, faster?
Yeah. So, I kind of listen to everything. So I started off with Are You Ready by Migos, which is from a soundtrack, just to kind of amp me up. I think when I was going uphill, it was Disturbed, Down with the Sickness.
Yeah, that's a slower tempo.
Yeah.
But heavy song.
And then Fade Away by Diecast which is a really fast drum set kind of song. That was on the flat side. Kill Switch Engage was on the flat side. Metallica, Enter Sandman, I think may have been the song so I listened to Are You Ready, I think, before the race. And then I think once I started going, I think is when Metallica Enter Sandman kind of kicked in. So that would keep me at a nice, even pace.
Right. Better than Master of Puppets if you're trying to follow the tempo.
I think Master of Puppets may have been on the faster side. Yeah, on the downhill or the flat side.
Oh, that's funny.
But so it was that there's some I did incorporate Wu-Tang in there somewhere.
We have to, especially if it's the Staten Island one. Yeah. Which did you know that they have a coffee shop on the island now?
No, I did not know this.
I have a buddy down the block who's a huge Wu-Tang guy, and I can't think of who it was. I don't think it was Method Man. Somebody opened one on the island. I think in like on Castleton, or maybe over near Stapleton. I don't know. I'll find the name of it, but now I have to go check it out. So that's pretty wild. No, that's so. I guess to circle back to April's interest in fitness and whatnot. So obviously she had a background, and you said she did modeling, right? So that's first of all, that's got to put a lot of pressure on you too, right? If that's something that she does professionally or whatever, like I give you a lot of credit, because being self-conscious, just about your own appearance and stuff, that can be pretty daunting. So that's cool. That speaks to the dynamic that you guys must have. And I think it's great that you have, I know she may not necessarily be in that direct support system, right? But just from a standpoint of, what she's doing around you isn't taking away from what you're trying to get done, right? So she's not an enabler in a negative sense.
Correct.
I would think. And I think that's a problem a lot of people have, especially in the couple's standpoint, is like, if both people aren't on board, it's almost like making it twice as difficult, right? Especially more so on the food front, but drinking wise. I think that's a challenge too. And that's something that you guys, so you said you were backing off from drinking. What's the situation, alcohol wise? Yeah,
I backed off again because I realized that, having a beer with alcohol in it is like 300 calories, where a non-alcoholic beer is like 60. It actually started last year for Lent. My sister had given it up. So I was like, hey, you know what? I'll give it up too. So then Easter came and I had myself a bourbon or something, and she's like, I'm still going. So I'm like, all right, so I'll still go too, I guess. And then the more I didn't have it, the more I realized that, like this is destroying everything I'm attempting to do. And now, so whereas April didn't do that, she was drinking, and she's a big more of a social drinker. I think kind of COVID, like most people, kind of like sent people off the rails. Absolutely. Not that she's an alcoholic by any stretch, but she likes to.
Everybody increased the consumption a little bit.
So for me, it was just like I'm good. Now, actually, this year my goal is to have as little as less than 24. So it gives me like 2 a month, but that's my less ambitious goal. My more ambitious goal is to have less than 1 a month.
One being like in terms of a drink, or
one drink, one alcoholic drink. So we're going away in April, so I'm sure that's going to have an impact. Although when we went away for our 20th anniversary in June of last year, I just sat there and I drank Heineken Zeros because that's all they had. So I mean, which is fine with me. And then the funny thing is, the more you don't drink and you're around people who do drink, the more you see how funny they look and how much it inhibits your ability to be aware of your surroundings.
Right.
Her and I went to Atlantic City to a concert in November, and I was the only one that was sober besides the bartenders. And I'm just watching everything that's going on. I'm like, if God forbid there's an emergency, this is the last place I want to be, because they have no idea most of these people had no idea what the hell was going on.
Right.
So I'm not that I'm trying. I don't like to use the word trying because I feel like I was taught in college that try is a failure word. And then Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try, right? He tells Luke, like, you either do it or you don't do it. And so I always do my best to tell my kids that. Like, I don't want to hear the word try. Like, you either do it or you don't do it. And there's a lot of power to that phrase. I think a lot of people miss it. But so I don't want to tell her what to do, but I tell her, so I let her know, like, you're working really hard for yourself and your appearance and everything. And then you'll go out and you'll poison your body with alcohol and, like, you'll feel like crap. Like, it does, to me, logically now, I've I guess, more spiritually, like, I've become more self-aware. Like, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you're going to work super hard Sunday through Friday, right? And go to the gym for an hour and work out. And then you basically throw it all away on Saturday by getting obliterated or like, it, to me, it doesn't make sense. Like, so, and now I think she's finally starting to understand that and finally starting to feel the effects of how bad, it affects your body.
100%. And I think it's, like most things, I think it's something that you have to come to on your own, right?
For sure.
In your own time. Because, and again, I had plenty of people, like you said, you have your neighbor, right? Like friends that were super fit, friends that had been my size but lost the weight. And like, I just wasn't ready at that time to take the advice to buy into it. So I get it. And it's frustrating. I'm sure it was frustrating for them in retrospect, right? To want to help me, to see how much I was suffering, right? Because I look back at some of these pictures, I'm like, oh, like I didn't like them at the time. And now I'm like, mortified of them. Like I was just hideous. And so again, it's allowing that person the grace to come to it on their own, I guess. I mean, it's a little different when you're living with the person and, and again, it's not even just the impact that it's having on her hard work or appearance or anything. It's also the health side, right? And that's the big thing that I learned about alcohol and alcohol consumption was last year. So I lost all that weight and I was hovering in that 172 range. And I as much as I was getting compliments from people, there were also comments about, oh, you look too skinny or whatever. And I'm like, listen, I spent so much fucking time in my life hearing the opposite, right?
Right.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
But even when my wife was saying, she's like, oh, more or less like, oh, you could afford to put on a few pounds. I'm like, no, like I mentally wasn't ready for that idea, that concept, right? Yep. And like, I wasn't so obsessive. Like, you have to realize there's natural daily fluctuations. Like, I'm sure if we were able to monitor our weight every second of the day for 24 hours, there'd probably be a 5-pound swing or maybe even an 8-pound swing in both directions, just based on fluids and just whatever it is. So I knew, like, if I was 176 one day, like, okay, I'll probably get back down. Like, I tried not to freak out about it. The problem was the nutrition coach that I was working with wanted me... I wanted to get to a certain aesthetic look, but I also wanted to get to a certain body fat percentage and stuff. And she was so great at helping me through this, the mental side of it, because it was like, no, you have to eat more to burn more calories to lose more weight, because you need the energy to put on lean mass. The more lean mass you put on, the more efficient your body is going to become at burning calories and and all that. So that was a scary concept to have, and so I took that more seriously through the first half of last year. I was like, okay, I don't want to bulk up. That's the last thing that I want to do. But clearly I need to add more muscle to help me lose more weight. And so I got to around June and like the workout lengths were increasing. The intensity of each workout was increasing. And I wasn't seeing anything. The weight was staying the same. The musculature was staying the same. And then what I was basing it off of in terms of like improvement was the number of reps I was able to do at a certain weight or the amount of weight that I was doing. And so I started to look into it. And I found, again, I'm a big like, there's a whole, obvious like social media fitness industry, a nutrition industry. So I'm very cautious about where I source my information from, and I always try to get it from different places because you never know. Like, especially the better the person looks, the more suspect I am about where they're coming from with stuff. So I lean more into like the science based ones, if only because they're able to throw out, hey, I'm saying this because of this study, this study, and this study. So at least I feel a little more confident in what they're saying. I want to say it was 5 different guys that I was, religiously watching their stuff. They were talking about alcohol being a gains killer. And so when I looked into it from a scientific perspective, like the way muscle growth works is obviously you're lifting the weights, you're tearing the muscle fibers, and then, protein and your caloric intake is important to help, recover and add more muscle fibers to what's been destroyed, which, and again, funny enough, all that stuff happens during rest periods. So it's not like so that's something that I wasn't really focusing on either, was like the sleep and rest and everything. But the point is that the alcohol molecules bind to those protein receptors and they block any new protein, they essentially block any new muscle from growing. And so I said, wow, I just went and worked out and my buddy invited me to go to Source Brewing. So there we are, right after my workout, pounding down beers. And so I said, all right, I'm going to not drink on lifting days. I'm going to take a break and we'll see what happens. And dude, it was almost within 2 weeks, the visual changes were amazing. And then just the gains, like I could see, I was like, holy shit, that's what it was. That's what was holding me back. And so the further back I scaled the drinking, and, now all of a sudden I'm seeing all these gains. And like you said, it was like this great feedback loop where I was like, before it would be like, oh, all right, it's Tuesday. I'll drink again on Thursday or Friday. And then we'll have a party night Sunday. And it was like, whatever. The mentality completely shifted. I was like, oh, I don't want to drink this week. I've got, these workouts lined up. Like, and so I understand what you mean about it being like no longer fitting in the goal like you have for yourself.
Yeah, and we went out to, not to keep reiterating, but Saturday we went out to dinner and, she had a glass of wine at the bar and she was like, just have a drink. And I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I have zero desire to drink right now. Like, I don't want to. Like, yeah. And at the table, she's like, have a piece of bread. I don't want a piece of bread. Like, I got specific goals that I want to meet my goals first. And, so there is a little bit of that peer pressure, but she's not pushy. I had a Christmas party back in December for work, and I was probably the only sober one. I came home. In fact, I came home and I said, "This is the most sober I've ever come home from a Christmas party before." Just because I just had no desire. I knew what it was going to do to me, and I was like, you know what? I don't want that.
And that's a great point that you raise. I didn't factor in, and again, just for the record, for anybody listening, I'm not dunking on anybody. If you love
for sure
drink it, go for it. Because that's one thing that I hate is when you have people. It's like they're coming to Jesus moment. All of a sudden they were heathens their whole lives, and now everyone else is a heathen.
Get off your high horse.
Right, exactly. And so I'm certainly not, and I'm not at a point. I have a friend who, again, parallel journey to ours too. Lost more weight than us. It's just like really went all in on it, and I don't think he's had a drop to drink in over a year. That's great. I would love to be able to say that, but I don't know that I'm not going to force myself to get to that point. Like if I like what you were saying, right? That your goal was 2 a month, maybe 1 a month if you could. I think that's more reasonable, and I think you're more likely to have months of 0 than you would be if you were to go into it saying 0 every month.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like,
yep.
What do you think of
that?
No,
agreed. I knew that and my sister's almost 12 months, she's almost at a year from when she started that.
Congratulations to her. That is amazing.
Fantastic. And a lot of it had to do with the evolution of the non-alcoholic industry. The beers now are nothing like, I don't want to knock old duels, but they're nothing like that anymore. Right? It's just bland. Like they actually have flavor to them. The Athletic Brewing Company is they just strictly non-alcoholic, and they put out some fantastic beers. IPAs, they put out non-alcoholic IPAs.
Yeah, I can't wait to try those out.
They put out the stout and everything. I'm a big stout guy, so that. Having those options has been so helpful in seeing like, yeah, you know what? I don't need to have alcohol. I'll just have an athletic or a Heineken Zero or something. So, and you get the feeling that you're drinking, but you don't get the negative side effects of it. So that's been fantastic. So that's been huge.
Yeah, and the mocktails, old fashions notwithstanding, right?
Exactly.
Those are great options too. And again, right, like, so for me, I've just always been an overthinker, hyper analytical person. The brain never shuts off. Right?
Same.
So yeah, so that's why I have a podcast. That's why I have all these things, because my brain's like, you're on your ass. You need to do something. Like, again, there's no trying. It's what am I going to do now?
Right.
And so for me, being a little more analytical of like, what is it that I get out of the experience? So for example, like, I was always a big soda guy. I don't remember when I stopped, but like it was always soda with dinner, and it was one of those things once I realized like how, I don't know if I was still living in Brooklyn or if I was in Staten Island. Regardless, I was working in the city, and Bloomberg put into effect this law of like having to show the calories, the sugar content, like all that stuff.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That was an eye opener for me. Like we used to go to Applebee's over by the mall, all the time. And when I realized that, like, we would get like, the appetizer sampler thing. So mozzarella sticks, the wings, whatever it was. I'd probably get a burger or the chicken fingers and fries. Mm-hmm. You're washing it down with 2 or 3 sodas. Like that was probably 4,000 or 5,000 calories all in just there.
For sure.
Way over the daily recommended value for sodium, for fat, for all that shit, right? And so with the soda side of it, there came a point where I was just like, okay, this is not, I was really scared of diabetes and all that stuff long-term, health-wise. And so I was like, all right, well, what do I get out of this? Like, it's a habit, obviously. So what's an alternative? And that's why you can see, like, I have all the spin drifts and seltzers and shit, because it's cold and fizzy. That's what I got out of it. It didn't matter that it was sweet. It didn't matter that it was, soda. I didn't need that part of it. It was just cold and fizzy. So once I shifted from Pepsi and Coke to, Schweppes or whatever, the seltzers, I had the same experience, the same level of satisfaction, and plus like a bonus of knowing that I was doing it in a more healthy way.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. It's really, once you get that and you have those substitutes. Now, if the non-alcoholic industry didn't have such an evolution where it's like now I've read a couple of articles that there has been more of a shift to non-alcoholic beverages. If that evolution didn't take place, then I probably still would drink a lot more than I am now.
And there's nothing, and that's the thing, right?
Again, right, nothing wrong with it. Like judgment-free zone. Yeah,
but I'm saying even for us individually, right? Like, so this was the single biggest challenge that I still admittedly struggle with. Was one of the things that the nutrition coach that I work with was like adamant about. She's like, you have to live life too. And for me, I was like, no, I don't agree with you. I know you're right in concept, but in execution, right? Like,
100%. I mean? Yep. April tells me that all the time. You have to live your life. I'm like, yes. I have to live my life, but I don't have to destroy it at the same time.
100%. And that's how it felt. It was like a slippery slope thing, right? So for me, it's a sweet tooth more than anything. Like, what was it? Pop'ems, right? From Entenmann's, the little things. Dude, I could demolish that. Heather used to get me, it was a giant Hershey Kiss. The thing was literally this big for Valentine's Day. I would eat the entire thing in one day and not realizing that it's like, 84 servings or whatever. Yeah. So for me, I was always afraid of it being a slippery slope. Mm-hmm. I've fixed that part of it a little bit. So I made, I can't think of what they're called, like the Italian rainbow cookies or something, the 7-layer cookies or whatever.
Oh man, those are so good.
So the kids really wanted them. And I had a friend who made some and gave them to us. And I was like, all right, fuck it, I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to make them. Ordinarily, like if I make chocolate chip cookies for the kids or whatever, I won't touch it. I don't want to open that door, because the problem for me was once I had one, the brain was like, ooh, that was great, let's have another. Yep. And so on and so forth. And so I was proud of myself that I made those, the rainbow cookies, and I had one and they were good. Like, and I mean, I cut them like super, super small. So for like 2 or 3 days, I had a hankering for it. So I had 1 or 2. But after the 3rd day, I was just like, I don't like where this is heading. Like in the moment, like those days, I had it. It was enough. I was good to go. But I could feel that habit forming. And so, like, again, I'm still sort of navigating that living life thing. I also hold myself to, like, a standard that nobody else would hold me to. So, for me, like, that's I don't know. It's like the whole cheat day thing. I don't want to do that. Like, what is the purpose of the cheat day in the grand scheme of things? Like, when I'm putting in all this work, the rest of the time. Mm-hmm. And the guest that I had mentioned previously, right? He lives by like an 80-20 rule. And I think that makes a lot of sense. 80% of the time, he is on point. He is disciplined. He's there. He goes on vacation. That's his 20%. He's going to go and enjoy it however that looks to him at the time, knowing that when he comes back, boom, he's right back into it. I don't know that I have that discipline to do it. It's more of a fear-based thing for me that, like, I'm afraid of having it snowball and, so I can relate to, what you're saying in terms of, like, making those drinking decisions or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially to, like, so on the alcohol side, it's funny, like, I drank a lot last year and the year before with a friend. So the nutrition coach's husband is a distance runner guy. He's like a freak athlete, like runs 7-minute miles, 10 miles at a clip. Like, no, really, really good. And he drinks a lot. Like, he can drink a lot of beer. So it was tough trying to hang out with him and, be more cognizant of my weight and self-conscious because he can pound him back. And like you said, the calories that he's burning in these workouts, like, he can absorb it better than I can. So I tried not to overdo it, but I also tried not to be too stressed about it. But it got to a point for me, like, over the last couple of months, once I started lifting weights, it was a different story. Because I was in the same boat. Like, I used to do really long distance, like cycling. I remember doing the 5-borough bike tour. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I did when I got home to celebrate was soloed. It was essentially a stout, but it was like a blended beer from the brewery. It was like 17% alcohol.
Oof.
It was like calorically probably 1,200 calories in that bottle. And I would do that frequently. Like, if I went out and had a super long workout, that was my reward was, well, I'm going to have this extra Bourbon County stout, or I'm going to have this or that. That's where I was like, no, I have to shift this. Like, that's not a reward. That's a punishment. Like, you just undid everything that you did.
Yeah.
And it didn't really click for me cardio wise, but it did with the gym. Like, because, again, you see these workouts that Ricky's doing, like, I'm nowhere near the level he is. But now that I'm doing those types of exercises and I'm at the gym for 2.5 hours, that's time that on the weekends that I'm missing with my wife, that I'm missing with the kids, and so I don't want to waste that by then going out and having a couple of beers for what? Like, just because that's what, people are doing. And so that's why I challenged myself. It was like the trifecta. I went out to a brewery with that friend that I mentioned and didn't drink at all. Like, he did, I don't think he appreciated it very much because it was weird for him, but I needed to prove to myself that I could do it, that I could be at a place that I loved with stuff that was very, readily accessible and not have it. Again, it's almost like the Holy Trinity. So he was the beer guy. Then I have another friend who's like a huge bourbon guy. We went out specifically, like, made plans to go out, and I didn't have a drop. And, like, he was confused. I think we were going to a concert too. And I was just like, have mine. Whatever you thought I was going to have, you have it. Like, I'm not doing this. And then when I knew I was really good and sort of past it was when I went out with my brother, who's a 20-year, Navy guy, 30 years at this point, submariner. Like, you want to talk drinking, like, he's a professional. And when I was able to go and visit him, and again, like, what the funny part was, there was confusion on the parts of the people that I was with.
Yep.
And maybe like a little bit of amusement, but there was no pressure in those instances. And so I lucked out that, like, I wasn't, like, they weren't mocking me. They didn't make me feel bad. And I was just like, yeah, like, I can go out and not have to do this, like, so I tried to take the social pressure off of myself, realizing that I was more or less the one that was putting it on me.
That's so true. Like, yeah. And I learned that at my Christmas party where it was like, everybody around me is drinking, and I stuck to, like, no, I'm having my non-alcoholics, and everyone's like, oh, come on. And, like, that social pressure was like, I was putting it on me. I was perfectly content with my non-alcoholic beers. I had a fantastic time, and I went home happy.
Yeah.
So,
and I never made the connection to it, but growing up as a kid in, like, the late 80s and early 90s, like, there was the whole big DARE movement, right? All the anti-drug stuff or whatever. So, like, that freaked me the fuck out. And I remember being terrified as I got to the teenage years. Like, where I grew up in Brooklyn, a lot of pot smokers. Like, it's just, and playing basketball at the park, you're there Friday night, Saturday night. There's a lot of people that are there doing it. And I remember being so scared that somebody was going to, like, make me have some. And I remember the first time it was offered to me, I was like, and I said, no thanks. And they were like, huh, more for me. And that was it. Like, they carried on with it. There was no, they didn't form a circle around me, whatever nightmares I had as like a 7-year-old.
Right.
It wasn't that. And so it's funny that I never connected that to the alcohol or even the food side of it, because, and poor April, here we're saying this, and here she is telling you to have a drink and have the bread or whatever. Right.
But, again, her heart is in the right place.
Right. And exactly. And that's where it's important, right? You understand the perspective of it. She wants, and I think a lot of times it comes from a place of that. She wants you to have a good time. She wants you to be able to enjoy yourself.
Yes.
She doesn't want to see you, and I'm not trying to put words in her mouth or thoughts in her head, but she doesn't want to see you be uncomfortable or feel like you have to not have stuff. But, and that's why it's good. Like, she could say what she said, and then she's letting it go. Like, she's not harping on it. She's not, riding you for not doing it or whatever. So that's good. That she shows that she's respecting your stance, and same thing, like you respecting her enough to let her have the glass of wine, because that was to bring it full circle back. I didn't realize the physical effects of drinking. Like, yes, I had friends that had sobered up or whatever, and they were like, oh, I feel so much better. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure, like whatever. But like, once I really started to have these long gaps between having drinks, like, holy shit. Yeah. Like, I just feel more energized, clearer headed. Like, just, I don't know. It makes me feel better. And so, and I'm noticing now, like, it's like the return on my investment, right, with the drinking, it's diminishing each time now. Like, I went out Saturday to what I consider like the best restaurant in Jersey, the best beer in the state, maybe in the country. And so I was like, all right, fuck, like, I'm having some, like, I don't care, like, that I will allot for, but I'm not going to just go to 618 and, start pounding down, Bud Lights because they're having a deal or something,
Yep.
And I enjoyed the taste of the beer. It was great. But then I woke up so sluggish yesterday. I was just like, every time it's happening now, I'm just less inclined to go for it.
Yeah, same.
And then, so again, not to put you on the spot or whatever, but then there's also like the mental side of it again for me too. Like, so I also woke up, this is the therapy session here, right? So like, I woke up feeling bloated, which could have been, it legitimately could have been from the beer. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was all in my head. But because I felt bloated, then I felt super fat and felt like it started this spiraling of like, ugh, like, all the negative self-imagery and all that kind of stuff. Do you ever have that happen either after meals, drinking, or just in general? Like,
yeah, this morning. To your analytic point, I'm an analytics kind of guy. I weigh myself every morning. It's like clockwork. I get up, I go to the bathroom, I weigh myself every day. And a lot of people are like, oh, you don't have to weigh yourself every day. From my perspective, I have to weigh myself every day, especially now, because I've been weighing myself every day for the better part of the last 5 years. It helps me to see trends. I'm not so much focused on the day-to-day change as I am the month-over-month change or the year-over-year change. When I start to see, a mountain going this way, I'm like, okay, you got to take your foot off the brakes. So that has helped me mentally, like, get focus on where I want to be, and it's like all right, I let you have your fun. This is where you're at now. It's time to put more work in and get a little bit more serious.
Well, and the fact that you put it that way is, I think, important, right? Like, so for me, it's fun. Certain things are fun in the moment, but the negative aspect on the downside of it, for me, it outweighs it, which is why I don't want to have those cheat days. That's specifically why I won't. Okay, maybe I'll enjoy that Shake Shack in the moment, but then do I really want to go through the mental hangups that are going to come the next day? It's like, again, like, what is it? Like the one night stands, right?
Right.
The regrets when you wake up.
Yeah.
The club's, the lights come on and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
That's because I'm standing in the mirror going, oh, what did I do?
Yep.
Yeah. And so like, I understand, like, I think it's not good just as a surface level thing, right, to be obsessive about checking your weight, because again, of those natural fluctuations or whatever. You said you weigh yourself in the morning after you go to the bathroom. If you weighed yourself before, it would be a different number, right? Yep. So like, I think I understand where that comes from, but I think you're doing it the right way, and I'm the same mindset of looking for trends, because that's what's really important. There's always going to be outliers. There's going to be different things that happen or whatever, and that's what's frustrating for me from the mental side of this journey. Was I was happy with all the commentary and stuff, being skinny. To the, I guess the peak of it was earlier. I almost said this year, 2024. I guess I'm still stuck in last year, but. Jackson was doing basketball in Belmar, and so the beach was there, and I've always been hyper I was the white t-shirt on in the pool kid, and so I forced myself to go and even if I was just going to go for a walk, to take my shirt off on the boardwalk, because again, it was April, it was May, so it was warm enough to do it. And it was just like, I had to have the AirPods in. Like, dude, it was so pathetic. Like, if anybody looked over, my brain just started going. It was like,
yes.
Can only imagine what they're thinking. Yep. Or, if somebody was like laughing, it was rough. Like, and I just forced myself through it. And the worst possible thing happened. I heard someone shout my name one day, and I was like, I'm like, that wasn't in the song. And then it shouted again. And then finally a girl comes over and taps me on the shoulder. And she goes, "Are you Matt?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Those guys are calling out to you." And I turn and look, and it was the dads from the basketball team. And I'm shirtless in shorts. And it was like a group of 4 of them. And they're all waving me over. And I was just like, oh, fuck, here we go. And I went over to them, and I was shocked. Like, the comments I got from them about the shape that I was in, it was all positive stuff.
That's great.
I have never had that. So that was kind of like an eye-opening thing for me too. Like, where it was just like, wow, like, again, being pessimistic in that regard, like, all right, maybe I don't need to keep bracing myself for the worst with this. Maybe I can kind of be more comfortable. But how do you undo, 20 or 30 years of negative comments and feedback? It just doesn't happen overnight.
No, time, right? Everything takes time. One of the things I had said to Ricky when I started my fitness journey was, I want Ricky boulder shoulders, and he's
got those.
And he's like, it's going to take time. Which I unfortunately had to learn the hard way. Like, I know it's going to take time. So I've settled into the fact that like it is going to take time. So I just sit there and I focus on the day to day. But we went on vacation with my next door neighbor in 2021, and he's sitting at the pool with his shirt off, and I got my shirt on, and April's like, "Well, take your shirt off," and I'm like, "Nope."
Right.
Not with muscles next to me. But in 2023 and 2024, I felt comfortable enough to sit outside with him and take my shirt off. And that was a huge moment for April, because she was like, "Oh my God, like now all of a sudden," but building that confidence again. 40 something years of that negativity and granted, it wasn't heard every day, but you hear it in your head every day, like look at you, you fat slob, like what the hell are you doing, and then doing nothing about it. And so finally, coming out of that shell was a good peacock chest kind of moment for me.
Yeah, no, dude, that's amazing. And it's tougher, right? To use April and then my friend James as an example. Like, for her, like, that's not a hang up, it seems, that she's got if she was involved in modeling, right? So she at least developed some semblance of, self, not whatever the opposite of an insecurity would be. Like, she's secure in herself, like she's confident in her appearance. And it's the same thing with the runner guy, who of course runs in tiny shorts and no shirt, 6-pack, galore. So it's tougher for people like us on the other side of it, because they can't necessarily relate, and it's not that they don't want to. And funny enough, that guy James was a huge supporter of me with all of this. Like, I would have thought, like, opening up to him was a big deal for me. Because of how he looked, right? Because of how he looked was how most of the people who were busting my balls looked.
Yep.
And to have someone who looked like that not be, making fun of, who knows, maybe he was saying nasty shit to his wife, afterwards, but at least he had the tact not to say it to my face or whatever. And it was also an evolution too. Like, again, talk about like the feedback loop, right? Like, so once I started to get a little more confident in the shirtlessness or whatever, like that was also concurrent with fashion because again, dude, I went from wearing double XL clothes to this is a medium, like, and it's loose. Like
That's
I
fantastic.
wear Sarah's middle school shirts because you know she doesn't want to wear them, and so for me, like that was a huge like bump up for me, right? So it's all of these like people get hung up on like the number, like, oh, I want to lose weight, I want to be a certain number, and I want to get to that with you too, just to see if we have the same experience, because I've been at two different numbers now and I wasn't happy with both entirely, which I'll get to in a second. But what people don't realize is in terms of losing the weight, like there's so many other benefits to it, like it's and those are the kinds of things that I don't know that motivate me now, you know, like, and so because I didn't like how I looked, I wasn't wearing the right kinds of clothes. They didn't fit the right way. So I didn't want to go out. Like I didn't want to go out to dinner with Heather, not because I didn't want to be with her, but like I was so self-conscious now. And so now that I got more into fashion and now that I feel better in what I'm wearing when we go to 618 or whatever, which again, it's funny. I keep using that as an example. There are plenty of people there in like sweatpants and hoodies and shit. But
yeah, we were there on Saturday. And that's what I wanted to wear, sweatpants. And she's like, you can't wear a baseball hat and sweatpants. And I was like, because I hate putting on jeans. But yeah,
so the jeans are so it's a great that's a great thing to bring up. I was talking recently with that nutrition coach, and that was something that came up, right? So for women, like jeans are a big thing, like fitting into certain jeans or whatever. And like for me, that was the gauge that I had too, because again, I was wearing, you know, these shitty Old Navy carpenter jeans or boot cut, whatever, you know, things, to now having like skinny jeans and like really skinny jeans. And it's just like, oh shit, like, wow. So it's a motivation for me not to, I want them to continue to fit, right? And so just to circle to what I was saying about the number, so I was at 172 for however long, and one of the big fears that I had was how I was going to react mentally to that number changing, that number going up. And so back in July when I stopped drinking and the muscle started adding on, I didn't weigh myself at all through the summer, through the fall. The first time I hopped on was when I went for my physical in December. And it was 183. Yeah, it was 183. And I freaked the fuck out. Like internally, like but it was clearly as close to 11 pounds of muscle as it could have been because the waist stayed the same. So those jeans fit even better now than they did before. But I was crushed. Like, and I'm still crushed. Like,
right.
And like, that's something that the nutrition coach, you know, mentioned. She's like, look, you got to realize, like, you know, you may never be happy with a specific number. It's more about being content with how you look, how you feel, like other things. And so, you know, I'm at a point where like, I don't know what it is about that. I think it is like a decade change, right? Like, so the 180s for me is like closer to the 190s, and 190s was 200s, and 200s was no good. The 160s was way too skinny. So I feel like where I'd like to settle is probably like in the upper 170s, because then I'll feel slimmer and slender. But I also realize that like there's a big difference. Like Heather, it's funny because of how you referenced April, or like maybe at the very start of all this. I know what you meant, right? In terms of her not filling out in terms of like, you know, heft or whatever. She just looks healthier. She looks fitter. She looks more like good for her frame and size. And I know that because that's what Heather was saying about me when I started to add muscle. She's like, you're filling out your shirt sleeves. Like, you look healthy. I didn't look healthy to her before. And the problem for me was I realized to some extent I wasn't thinking healthily either. I was like obsessive over, you know, the weight number. And it was like, oh God, 176, now I'm fat again. Like, and you know, I might like, was she able to tell the difference between 172 and 177? Probably not. But for me, the mental aspect being so skewed and the dysmorphia coming into it, like I felt like I had the big, you know, pregnancy belly again. And like, is that something that you've encountered too, or is it like different for you with all that?
Yeah, every day, even now. You know, yeah, at 200, I felt like a fat slob. At 168, I still felt like a fat slob, even though I wasn't. Yeah, I think I'd probably like to settle into the 175, 180 range. I would be, I understand that it's just the number. I would be perfectly content at a skinny 185. So that's kind of not where I want to get to, but that's my mentality. Is it's more about the how I feel and how I look as it is the number. Like that's just a benefit. If I'm 185 pounds, but I look and feel how I want, then so be it. If to the weight loss, right? I'm trying to my goal for weight right now is 175. I understand that 2 years of exercise, I may not be able to get down to 175 unless I start losing muscle mass.
Right, which you don't want to do.
Right. So if I hover around 180 and so I'm going to keep my calorie counting at the same I'm going to give it like a month and a half just to see how I do. If I don't lose any more weight, then so be it. But if I start feeling that the inches are still coming off, then I'm like, okay, this is my baseline. I'm not going below this.
Right.
And just so it's up from here, but and again, like it's up from here, but I'll be but like I'll be happy. Not happy because I don't think you're ever happy, but I'll be content with going up as long as it's not as long as my body fat's not going up.
Right. And that's kind of the point. If there was one reason or one purpose that I had in us having this discussion here specifically, instead of just through DMs on Instagram, it's the fact that like there's like a weird stigma associated with like guys. Like I don't think people realize that men sort of go through this too. Like it's like the stereotypical like female thing. Like I feel fat, and it's like, but it's like a girl thing. But it's not a girl thing. It's a person thing. And I think it's just different mentalities. Like we can be guys and have the same insecurities. Maybe it's not exactly the same, right? And it's still a big challenge. And we have the same sort of thing. So for girls, maybe it's, girls in a two-piece bathing suit versus a one-piece or whatever. For us, it's the shirtless thing, I think. Like you see a guy who's, ripped, whether it's Ricky ripped or your neighbor or whatever, it makes us self-conscious.
Yeah.
And, I guess like the funny thing is it's sort of the same thing as the not drinking at the work party. Like the odds are no one's going to walk past you and your neighbor, shirtless together and be like, oh, look at that guy. like we feel it internally. We think that it's going to go that way, but that's not really, what happens. And yeah, like I think a smart thing that you're doing is something that's critical to success in the long run. And that's to have longer term goals and to look at trends more so than anything else. So when I finished that, it was an 8-week nutrition course that I did. I lost like over 20 pounds. I took progress photos at the start and I couldn't wait to take the progress photos at the end. I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. And I took those photos and I was almost as crushed as when I got the DEXA Fit score because I didn't see a difference. And, and Danielle was like, well, yeah, like, yes, you can see a difference, but, whatever. And like, again, like I went through all the negative things. You're just saying that, like, I don't, you're just being nice, blah, blah, blah. And rather than throwing a pity party for myself, well, I mean, I had one, but rather than making it like a Sweet 16 level pity party, I was like, fuck it. You know what? I started May 26th was when I took the first photo. So I'm going to give myself until May 26th of next year, full year, to see. Because realistically, in retrospect, 8 weeks was fine to lose weight, but not enough for my body to catch up, right? Like to adjust to it. And so last May, when I took those pictures, I was happy. I was like, holy shit. Okay, this is what I thought those August pictures were going to be. So at least I got to that point. And I'm hopeful for May of this year, I'm going to do the same thing. And I don't know that I'm going to continue it, just through indefinitely. But I think it's important to give yourself time to make those adjustments. And what made me think of it was what you were saying about like the shoulders and stuff. Like there's also, you can't just put it on yourself that like, oh, I need to have this aesthetic. I need to do, I need to look this way and stat. And if I don't, then it's a failure. There's 3 different heads to the shoulder muscle, right? There's how many different exercises for each of those heads. They're not all going to work for you, and even the ones that work may work to a certain point and then you plateau and then you need to audible and do something else. So I think that's where our self-analytic aspect is like a superpower, because it enables us to be like, okay, like as long as we can reduce our emotional connection to it, the negative side of it, where we're like, oh, I failed. This isn't working and it's because I'm not doing this or that. If we can sort of divest ourselves of that and just be like, okay, it worked to this point. Now I need to shift gears. Now I need to go in this direction or whatever and try something new. It gives us that leeway that will help us to continue to work on it and to continue to see improvement versus, feeling like we failed. Like, again, 2 hours and 4 minutes. I know exactly what that feels like. I used to be a nines guy with running. God forbid if I was, at 49 minutes and it went to 50, I would feel like that run was a failure for whatever the distance was. So that,
I get that. Yep.
Yeah, just getting over the 2 hours. If it had been 1:59, you would have been like over the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a 5-minute difference, but at least you seem like you've sort of absorbed it and understand that's still a huge accomplishment and success. And no, you didn't hit the specific number that you want, but you gave yourself the grace and the leeway to appreciate what you did accomplish, which I think is, that's a positive sign, right? It's not all
for sure
negative stuff.
Especially when I was super negative back then. So for me to not think that way, it took me a while to get over it.
I'm sure. And you mentioned father time, right? So I would have never. I'm not going to out you on your age, but I would have had no idea. I thought you were younger than me, so which is great. But when I turned 40 2 years ago, I was like March 28th when I went to bed. I was petrified of waking up the next day because I thought I was going to be depressed. I thought I was just going to feel old and useless and terrible, and that was the opposite. That was really waking up the next day, the unofficial start to all of these changes. Because I woke up and I was like, holy shit, like I've got a lot of time left and a lot of quality years left ahead of me. Like, I don't want to waste this. Like, why squander it, And so I sort of use that as motivation. And 2 years into my 40s, this is already the best decade that I've had. Way better than the 30s and 20s from a health standpoint, how I feel, how I look, just lifestyle stuff. And so my goal is for when I get to my 50s to make that even better than the 40s, there's no reason not to shoot for things like that. And I have friends of varying ages just across the board. We have friends who are in their 70s who they're going on cruises. They're doing a lot of travel. Like they're embracing life versus other folks that we know that are in the same peer group as them.
Sure.
Nothing. They're couch potatoes. They're just counting down the seconds until it's all over. I don't want to be that. I want to be the one that's out living and, and enjoying stuff.
Yeah, agreed. And, I'll be 45 in March. And it's definitely the best decade for me personally so far. My brother-in-law, I won't out him, but he's in his 50s and he looks fantastic. So I hope I look as good as he does when I'm in my 50s. At the gym, there are a lot of guys that are in their 60s and they look fantastic. And it's like, wow, yes, you start losing muscle mass, but you don't have to, you can slow it down.
Right.
You don't have to lose as much as fast. So there are means for you to fight father time and keep moving. Right, I keep my parents. I keep yelling at them like, "You guys got to keep moving, because once you stop moving, that's when everything starts to hurt, and that's when everything starts to ache." And I read a book called I think it's called Longevity. It's by Dr. Peter Attia, I think is his name. I'm butchering it, I'm sorry, but it's a fantastic book, and he goes into a lot of science and basically explains, a lot of people don't move because they hurt, but they don't realize that they're hurting because they don't move, and that has a lot of, a lot of power behind it. And I always tell my mother, just get up and move. Like, if your knees are hurting, just walk. Like, you don't have to walk a lot, but just walk, do something. So I'll never, I don't really, I don't like to, if I see somebody at the gym, good for you, man. You're the hard part's over. Right. Now, like, you got here. So, whatever it is that, mentally that you feel that you have to do, you're doing it. I mean, there's a woman, she's, I don't want to, I think she's in her upper 60s, 70s. She could barely walk, and my heart breaks for her. But she's at the gym every morning.
Right.
And she's putting in work. So kudos to her. And you know, it's almost like, all right, if she's out doing this, I have no excuse.
Absolutely.
Right. Like there's no reason. No matter how I feel and the worst day, like she's going to be here. And I kind of use her as motivation with that mentality. Like, especially on the days that I don't feel like going to the gym. It's like, yeah, but I know she went. So if she went, like you have no excuse. Like get your ass up and go. And fortunately, I have less days now than I did before.
Right.
Of that kind of mentality. Like it's just been so ingrained in me that, you know, like you have to go to the gym. And now like it's become part of my day. Like if I don't go to the gym, I start almost having anxiety. Like
100%.
Yeah, 2 days in a row. I can't miss 2 days in a row. Like I gotta go. I gotta do something.
The first thing I said to Heather when I woke up this morning was like thinking about the gym, because I didn't go yesterday, and I was just dragging ass this morning, and I was just like, well, I definitely have to go. She knows better. She's just like, of course you're going to go, like relax, like. But I feel that same sort of anxiety, and I don't know if this is your experience too, but like those days where I was just like, ugh, I don't want to go, but I went anyway, almost unilaterally, were some of the best workouts that I had. And like, because I was afraid of like half-assing it, and I don't know, there's just something like internally that like clicks where it's just like, no, I'm here, like do it, like stop, yeah, you're tired, okay, well that's what tomorrow's a rest day. That's the mentality that I use. I said tomorrow's a rest day, and the good thing is that tomorrow never comes, so I just keep working at it. But yeah, and it's funny, so a lot of the back pain that I had that I was dealing with, once I lost the weight, a lot of it went away. But I noticed that through going through physical therapy or whatever, like the therapist was saying, like, look, you gotta, work on your glutes more, like do more leg workouts and all this kind of stuff. If you're taking long drives, stop and take a break or whatever, stretch it out. And really the point is that so much of the pain that I was feeling was more from inactivity. It was from sitting too long, where like my glutes and hamstrings tightened up from inactivity, from not moving around. Yeah. And that's what caused the back pain. And so I totally get it. Like that's a smart way to view it. And my neighbor Larry is a great example. I almost shit. I thought he was 60. Maybe I'm just not a good judge of ages. I thought he would turn 60. He turned 70. He's the guy, he's out there with his freaking knee pads on, like scraping the concrete. He's constantly doing stuff and moving. And so like that is super, super critical. And have you ever heard of, it was a documentary, I think it was on Netflix, called The Blue Zones? No. I'll send it over to you. I won't waste time here talking about it. There are basically these pockets of centenarians, right? So the disproportionate proportion of people living into their hundreds. Yep. And so this guy went to these so-called blue zones to sort of investigate, like, are there any commonalities? Because they were spread out around the world. It's not just, here in the States. And that was one of the key things was they're moving, they're doing stuff, they're active. A lot of them, they're gardening, they're just doing different things that are getting them up and getting them out. And I think it's, a really important thing, especially from the mental health standpoint. I don't know, like for me, cardio was a big thing for me. Like if I was feeling down or having a lot of anxiety or just feeling like shitty, like going out and exercising and just, sweating it out really does help. So there's something to be said for that too, I think.
Yeah, he in that book, he talks about centenarians and how, It
would be funny if it was the same guy. I don't remember the name of the guy.
Yeah. So he's also on Nat Geo, Chris Hemsworth did a 6-episode series, I saw that, yeah. Limitless. Yeah. It's fantastic. I love it. I will watch it over and over again. And he goes into cold plunges. I haven't done a cold plunge in a while, but like I really was fascinated by the science of that they go into and about the benefits of cold plunging, and it's blown up like in the last 2 years. And just conversely, like saunas and stuff like that. I have a sauna in our basement.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I don't use it as much as I should, but every time I go in there, I'm in there for 20 minutes, and I come out and I feel like $1 million sometimes, and it's just like it's a good mental escape. Like I'm in there, I put on like, you know, rainforest sounds or something like that, and it helps like mentally clear your mind.
Absolutely.
And not paying, you know, it's 20 minutes that I don't pay attention to my phone, and you know, I'm just kind of like relaxing, and it helps in the recovery. I've been very recovery heavy. I have, oh my God, I have so many. April keeps yelling at me because I'll buy a new recovery gadget. And what do you need this for? I'm like, oh, I need it for this. And I have the Therabody leg compress, like, you know,
yeah, the compressions.
yeah.
Right.
I have that. I have the gun. I have ice packs that vibrate and stuff like that. Heat packs that vibrate. So like I have everything, and they really do come in handy, especially as you get older. Like you know.
Well, yeah, recovery is the hardest part. That's what makes like people like LeBron, you know, like so amazing is what they're able to do at the age. Because look at, I don't know how big you are to the NBA, but if you look at Vince Carter as he limped towards his 40s, like yes, he played, you know, a little bit into it, but it's night and day between him and LeBron. And
sure.
LeBron puts so much into his body and his recovery, and obviously he has the, you know, financial resources to do that.
Yep.
But on a smaller scale, you know, I can appreciate it.
Well, you could look at, you know, the comparison, right? Who's the greatest of all time? Is it LeBron or is it Michael Jordan? And I think if Michael Jordan had the science that LeBron has,
You mean smoking cigars and drinking beers after the game?
Yeah, probably
not
a big deterrent.
Yeah.
But, you know, having the hyperbaric chamber and focusing on recovery. You know, they had ice baths back then, and you know, but I don't think they understood more the science of it as much as they do now.
Yeah, the exercise science now it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Have you ever done cryotherapy?
I have not. No.
Chill. That's another thing. So I got a gift card to this place, and they have spots throughout New Jersey, but I go to the one in Red Bank. It's called Chill RX. It's wild. It's liquid nitrogen that gets like pumped through. You can do up to 3 minutes or 4 minutes. So I go for the 4-minute one. And it's like, as lame as it might sound, I think you get where I'm coming from with it. Like, it's almost like a spiritual experience. Like, cause you're standing there and, you know, basically nothing. And it's like, it goes down to like, I forgot what it was, like 200 below zero, some insanely low temperature. And like, it forces your body, it kickstarts this like reaction, which is probably similar to the cold plunge and stuff, where it's a physiological reaction that your body has to the temperature and to everything around it. And I know like when I leave there afterwards for at least the next couple of hours, like I just feel refreshed.
Yeah.
Like it's different. So I can appreciate like trying to do different recovery things and stuff.
Your body goes into survival mode, basically.
Right.
You know, it's like, all right, now like everything kind of constricts, and all your blood is drawn to your vital organs to keep them going in that kind of a situation. Right.
Well, and this always drove me nuts. So like being a basketball player, I was constantly rolling ankles and having things like that happen, and I hated. I mean, icing it would work to an extent, but what I would always do was I would get a pot of super hot water and then a pot of super cold water, and I would leave it submerged for 2 minutes in one, and then immediately shift to the other, and go back and forth until they were basically the same temperature. And I found that, and admittedly, this could be a placebo effect. I don't have the science behind it, but I felt like the recovery would be much quicker that way. And what I attributed it to was the fact that you're expanding and contracting. So you're forcing stuff in and out. Like so much of the tissue that's there with the swelling, something has to be happening with it, And so in terms of like doing a sauna and doing the chill therapy and, the ice bath and all that stuff, like, yeah, it's you're forcing your body to sort of move in different directions, and force blood flow and contract it, right? Like when you're in the ice bath, everything goes to the core to keep you warm, but then it comes back out. So there's some sort of expansion and compression and stuff. So
for sure.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I'm just glad that we were able to have this discussion, because it was so trippy for me to know that somebody else was going through like seemingly the exact same things that I was. And like, I'm hopeful for us, because I think that I know the challenges that I have mentally, right? In terms of like being, I don't know, happy with myself. And part of it is I never want to settle, right? Like I feel like if I'm happy with something, there's always room for improvement. So
always.
like, there's that sort of razor's edge of being too hard on yourself and never being happy, and being happy enough but still motivated to go, because that's my biggest fear. And that's why I did shift gears towards trying to bulk up or put on some muscle. Was I was like, I'm not ready to hit maintenance mode yet. Like that terrifies me more than anything.
Yeah.
What the hell is that going to look like when I'm just eating the same every day and doing the same workout all the time? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to go through this constant ebb and flow of bulking up and slimming down or whatever. But like, I mean, that's future Matt's problem. I don't have to worry about that now.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, by the way, you are part of that support group. You like, you know, our conversations.
I'm always here, dude. Like, I love
fantastic.
talking about this.
Super helpful, especially that we're going through similar journeys, and so that, you know, that support has been really helpful. So I appreciate that, and thank you for that. And yeah, like I said to you, and I feel like I was having a conversation with myself with you know, it's like, wait. Like, it's almost like an out-of-body experience. Like,
Right.
Like, am I talking to myself here?
No, and for me, it's been such a lonely journey in some ways, and then it's just such a shitty experience. Like, again, walking around carrying all of that, like, you know, just shittiness from people, you know, like, and that's one thing. Like, I'm very cognizant of like how I speak in front of the kids, and like there's certain words, like this goes back, this is a separate thing, but like, you know, growing up in a volatile household, like I saw a lot of fighting and how that went. And so like when Heather and I started dating, like we made a list of like words that we wouldn't use in fights, like shut up, just different things where it's just like, these things are not conducive to resolving a dispute.
Yep.
It just hurts other people or whatever. And so one of the zero tolerance things that I have in the house is comments about people's appearances. I like, because I know how much it hurts to have had that, whether it was meant in jest, whether it was just like, you know, again, like certain friends that would walk up, I haven't seen them in three or 4 months, you know, and first thing to do is pat me on the belly, like, oh, somebody's been enjoying himself, you know, shit like that. Like, maybe they can brush it off and maybe they don't care, but for me, like, I'd be crushed, you know, and like it, and so it's a relief to be looking the way that I look, to be getting the commentary that I'm getting now. I'm trying to mitigate the fear aspect, because I never want to go back to the other side of things. I never want to, you know, whatever. And admittedly, like, I'm so stressed now about not being able to lose the weight again. Like, am I a one trick pony? Was it a one-time thing? Yep. And I know that's not healthy, and I know it's not true. And as much as I hate this because of freaking Embiid and the Sixers, like, I'm trying to trust the process of, you know, of understanding it's a longer term thing, you know, and like, I may need to make adjustments. So I'm trying to have that leeway for myself in terms of, okay, like maybe this month wasn't great. What can I change? What did I do that got me here? You know, and again, that stretch in September where I had all those concerts and was eating shit food, I needed to get past that, you know, and recognize like, look, now I can look back at that and be like, look, I survived that, right? I didn't go off the rails. I didn't gain 50 pounds. Like it was fine. And so it's learning not to catastrophize every little thing like that. But it's also really hard to change that mentality. And so I appreciate that we have each other to lean on in that regard, and that you have a bigger network. And dude, like, you can always reach out. Like, I want to hear more about like the workouts and all that kind of stuff, because that motivates me. It makes me happy to know, like, all right, it's working for you.
Yep.
There's something that's going to work for me. Or, you know, I'm a very internally driven person to begin with. So, which was why the Dexafit thing just crushed me. Like, again, I'm dead serious. The numbers themselves, I don't think mattered as much as the fact that it was a fucking B+. If it was an A-, I think I would have been like, you know what, this wasn't too bad or whatever. That sent me spiraling, where like I went and researched on my computer. I found my transcripts from college, because I was like, I don't even know the last time I got a fucking B+. And I like, it was bad. But again, like that's the perfectionist in me in terms of like the standard that I hold myself to. And so that it wasn't the grade itself, it was what it represented, and it looked like failure to me. And so like, that's why, like, I apologize for going off the deep end in the messages about the stupid Dexafit. I'm glad I got the information that I got. It took a week to really like sort of process the emotional reaction to it and understand it. And if anything, it helped me to sort of realign my goals, because we were both saying we wanted to shoot for, like, I was aiming for like 15% body fat, right? Thinking like, and as an arbitrary number, like I felt like 12 and under was probably unreasonable. 15 seemed, you know, like I could get there or whatever. I don't know if this will make you feel any better or worse, but in researching that, I just found out that the percentage of the population, what would you guess the percentage of the population is for 15% before you answer? Thinking like 15% to me is like in pretty good shape. Like you can start to see some abs, but you're not, like super jacked or super ripped. Like what percentage would you say the population hits with that?
In the world or in the United States?
Just in the U.S.
Oh, in the U.S.? We're a pretty big country, so I got to say it's got to be less than 1%.
See, I figured it was more like 5 to 10% or something like that, just in terms of like thinking of athletes, right? Like 15 or under or whatever. It was 2%, so that's a great guess.
Wow.
So 2% of the people just walking around the country now are at 15% or under. So that made me feel a little better because I didn't think of that as an elite level to work towards.
Sure.
But it is, right? Because my kids have these aspirations to play college ball, and that's the first thing that everybody loves to point out. Only 2% of high school players make it. Well, so if 2% in that realm is this impossible number, then maybe I should feel a little better about not reaching it, there. And so the point is that it helped me to realign my goals, and I'd love to get under 20, but that's arbitrary too. Like I'm trying to realign my goals. Like if I get under 20, am I going to be happy, or am I going to be like, oh, I really should get to 18? And if I get to 18, do I need to get to 15? So the goal that I have for this year with this journey is to find a way to be happier, more accepting, and have sort of like a spectrum that I can inhabit, where like you were saying, like you were able through the holidays, you gained a little bit of weight, you lost a lot of it in a much quicker time frame, so that's sort of the goal that I'm looking for, not in terms of like weight gain and loss, but just being able to be happy with a lifestyle and how I look, and not worried so much about, how much I weigh, what the DEXA fit says, any of that stuff or whatever. I don't know if I'll ever get there, but at least it's a goal to work towards,
Well, B+ is not a terrible grade, especially, as a baseline. Like that's a really good baseline number to have. I don't think your mentality of, okay, at say you're at 20% body fat, like, next year I want to be at 18 and am I going to be happy at 18? I don't think that's necessarily a bad attitude to have or a bad way of looking at it, because before you know it, and this is where time comes in, right? Everything takes time. Having that mentality, before you know it, you might be at that 15% number, and then you're going to look back and like, if you want to go from 20 to 15 in a year, it's probably a lot more difficult than going from 20 to 19 to 18. Like, so I don't think 15 is that far out of reach for us, but it's more quieting the brain down and focusing on one step at a time and getting there slowly as opposed to overnight.
I totally agree. And I'm not dismissing it as a goal anymore. It's more, I'm looking at it from a sort of more macro perspective, right? In the sense of, I could get to 15% and be like thrilled, right? Like this could be the best thing ever. This is where I want to be. And now I'm happy. And now I'm staying here. The fear is that I could go through all of this, because it's a lot of work, a lot of changes, a lot of self-sacrifice, right? A lot of discipline to get down there. So to go through all of that and then still not be happy, that's what I'm more looking at.
Yeah.
Like, and again, I agree with you. Like you're in theory way fitter and healthier at 15% than at 21% or whatever it happens to be. And so, I totally agree. Like, and especially if you're doing it over as an incremental thing, if you're getting 1% better, literally like every year, that's a great thing too. I just want to make sure I'm recognizing now that there's an extra element that I need to fix. And that's the happiness factor part of it. Like I need to be, but because that was a big issue that I had being in the 170s. I would wake up and have this sort of like concavity, right, to the belly section. That was always where I carried the most weight. And so there was anxiety that came with that. Like if I got up to 176, my brain would see it differently. Like I would be like, oh, I could see, the fat, which is bullshit. There's no way that I looked visibly different, 3 pounds, in a week or whatever. And then I would get back down to 172 or 173. And it wasn't happiness. It was like a sick relief, a momentary relief that was immediately followed by anxiety of like, okay, well, let's hope it doesn't go back up again. Yes. I don't want to be that way. That's really the bigger goal that I have, is trying not to get obsessed with the numbers whether it's body fat percentage or weight. I'm going to focus on, I have my macros lined up. I have my calorie goals and everything that I'm shooting for. I'm going to stick with that for a couple of months and just see what happens. Because that's just it. We're works in progress. And as long as we're accepting of that, I think it's, it's better.
Yeah.
And one thing I'm getting better at is not viewing myself in relation to other people, because that was a big challenge. And that's why I didn't want to start to bulk up, because you might look at Ricky and go, all right, you know what? I want to I want to have shoulders as big as his. Then you have shoulders as big as his, but this one guy that you like on YouTube or on Instagram, then you're like, oh man, but that guy. And then you're just in this perpetual chasing. And again, you're not happy with what you've got. And that's the challenge, I think, for our wives, is they're not up in here with us, so they don't understand that part of it. They see us, they're happy with us, and they just want us to be happy. So, at least for me, our wives are the smarter ones. Let's maybe try to listen to them a little more and realize, okay, you know what? Maybe I can find a way to be happier with it. But it sounds like for what it's worth, it sounds like you've made an incredible amount of progress. And I respect the hell out of the discipline that it takes to do that. I know what a challenge it is to deal with, what's happening between the ears more so than, on the weight rack or on the plate even, know. And it sounds like the approach that you're taking is a good one. Finding substitutions and, not being so restrictive that you're like, well, I'm not having anything to drink ever. I'm never having bread. If you want it, you want it. If you don't, you don't. You understand where those things fall into your perspective and your day to day, and that's it. That's a hard thing, and I don't think people get enough credit for it. So there's a lot of respect from this side of the table.
Yeah. No, thank you. It's certainly not easy, but nothing in life is easy, especially something that you want to and you strive for, and that goes to the hard work. Right, hard work is. What's the saying? Hard work beats talent on most days or all days, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's it. I mean, you could tell the kids that work hard and the people that work hard, they're generally more successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And happier
Yes.
with the success, which we're getting there. And I think we will. I think that, we have the right, parts of the puzzle. We just need to find them, how to fit them better than instead of just shoving them in.
Yeah, I think so. I'm always looking at my stomach and I'm like, I got to get that down. And then I see some people who are really big and it almost looks like they have a stomach. Now, granted, it's probably their muscles that are sticking out like that. But I tend to feel a little bit better. I'm like, all right, that guy's got what looks like it's a little bit of a belly, so maybe I'm not too far off from where I want to be. But then again, it's,
And there's other external factors, right, that are at play here. Genetics is a big thing.
Yep.
And that's another thing in some of these discussions I've had post DexaFit results was I may get to 15. That's the other thing. I may get down to 15% and not look at all like what I think I'm going to look like at that. Mm-hmm. So that was more where I got sort of evaluative of all right, what's really at play here. And then genetics, age, time, it's much harder for us to lose weight in certain ways at certain ages. To again, we could go on that tangent forever. I think what's more important is more often than not that we're making the healthy choice, that we're doing the right thing. We're forgiving when we have a one-off sort of thing. And again, it's the same thing. Like Heather and I, at some point we're going to go out to 618. And while I'm there, Matt's old fashioned. They didn't name it after me, but I like to pretend, right? I'll probably have one or two. But you know what? For me, mentality wise, if I do choose to do that, it'll be because for the 2 weeks leading up to it, I didn't have a drop. And the 2 weeks after that, I won't have a drop. Like that, I turn that into positive motivation where it's like the next day I wake up, it's like, okay, I had my fun yesterday. I'm good to go. But more and more, it's getting spread out now where it's just not as frequent. I think we just need to be, if there's one thing I would wish for us, it would be to be more at peace with ourselves and the process and understanding that it's a journey. It's not there's not destinations that we're working towards and we get there and that's it. There's always going to be, something for us to work towards or whatever. And as long as we're doing the right thing more often than not, I think we're good to go.
Yeah, a lot of acceptance on the journey. Just accepting the fact that there's going to be bumps in the roads, and there's going to be difficult times, and there's going to be easy times. But accepting them and moving forward. Keep moving forward and progressing. I always do my best to be better today than I was yesterday, and just taking it one day at a time. Because
and one day you may not be as good as the day before, but then that's what tomorrow is for.
Exactly.
No, and I appreciate. Listen, your support has meant a lot, especially going back to the Aces banquet. That was a huge turning point for me because that was the first time that I was out socially and eating healthy and was around someone else who was doing the same thing. And like, I'm not knocking anybody else that was at the table. I felt confident and I felt like I had finally made it, right? Like I was making these good decisions. I didn't feel left out. Like I was content with what I was eating, and to have that sort of like feedback and then support, like seeing you do the same thing that I was doing was great, man. So I really appreciate your role in my journey, and if I've had any sort of impact on your viewers,
you have.
I appreciate it, and I think we've got each other's backs here moving forward. So hopefully the rest of this year will be the best one since we started.
Without a doubt, it's been. I mean, April and I were blown away at when you walked in the door. We were like, oh my God, like Matt looks fantastic. Like what the hell's he been doing?
Right.
So that was a. It also was an eye-opening moment for me, like to somebody else, in a similar journey, and it gives you motivation to keep going, and so that was good from that perspective as well.
Yeah.
So
well, I'll tell you what, if you and April and me and Heather go out to 618, you and me can sit there and not drink together and let them have whatever they want. We can pass the bread over to them, and we can be happy knowing that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
No, dude, this was so great. I really appreciate you coming all the way out here, especially freaking snow. Like it's so funny. It's so hard to get people to follow through on things, whether it's plans for dinner or for a freaking podcast, especially. Follow through is just so difficult. So the fact that you came all the way up here in the snow with all this, I really, really appreciate it. It says a lot about your charter. And
this was a lot of fun. This was my first podcast, so it was.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, it was really neat. I was very excited to do it.
Yeah, no, this was great, and we still have meat on the bone for if you ever want to do another one. We can go into the horror movie stuff and some music and
and coffee
Yes, we can't. Yes, we can't end without a coffee thing. So real quick, what's the background with your interest in coffee? Because I haven't met most people that I've met in Jersey. It's Dunkin' Donuts. It's not at all what I think we're into. So where did you get into it?
So it started with Starbucks. I would get my hazelnut coffee every day, and like that was it. And I guess at some point when I was running, I realized that the syrup was no good for me. So I got to get rid of the syrup. So I would have I'd have milk and then like 2 teaspoons of sugar, and then I cut back to 1 teaspoon of sugar, and then I was putting such a little amount of sugar in. I'm like, well, what am I doing? Like this is just a waste. So I cut the sugar out. So I was just putting in like a splash of milk or whatever. And then one day I woke up and I'm like, the milk's not doing anything for me either. Why am I bothering with that? So I just stopped. So when I got to drinking just black coffee, I could really taste the coffee and appreciate it more. COVID hit. It was tough to get coffee anywhere. Right. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start making my own. My dad is a Navy veteran. He does a lot of work with the American Legion. So I said, you know what? I'm going to find a veteran-owned coffee company, which there are a ton apparently, and support them. So I found one, Invader Coffee. It's called. It's out of Texas. That I tried and I really liked, and so now I drink Starbucks and I'm like, this is gross. Like this is so bitter. I was also looking for something like a low acid option because destroying my stomach. And I'm like, I need something better. So I think there's Life Boost is another low acid company. So I touched on them. And then that's when I got into like, you know what? And instead of this, let me find a smaller veteran-owned coffee. And then them, like I really like this coffee. So for me, that's where Dunkin' Donuts I never liked. I always thought it was just coffee flavored water. But you're right. In Jersey, there's not many people who don't like it's Starbucks or
loaded with milk and 5 sugars or cream or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I used to think that I was better than people who because I drink black coffee, and then I realized that I am better. Then I'm just kidding.
Right.
But it's such a different, I don't want to say experience, but it like I wake up in the morning and like that first sip is
it's great.
It's such a great feeling. Like especially like I mean I'll drink it any way. It could be hot, it could be cold. I brew like 14 cups every day or every other day or whatever it is, and I'll have my cup, and then I pour.
Like a drip machine or what's?
Yeah, drip.
Okay.
And then I pour the rest of it into like a big, it's like a 64-ounce thermal, like a Yeti, almost kind of like. Actually, it's from Kane Brewery.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
because they had the connection with Rook for a while too.
Yeah, so I bought a big one that I had beer in, and I was like, you know what, this is perfect for my coffee. So I keep it in there, and I keep it on the counter, and however it is the next day, I drink it. I don't care. But that first sip in the morning, even the dog knows now. Like he don't go out until I have my first sip of coffee.
Right.
It's such a weird. I don't want to use the word weird experience, but like
it's ritualistic, dude.
Yeah, and it's very pleasing.
100%.
And so I take a lot of pride in my coffee. Like my coffee is my coffee. Like I could spill a beer and not be upset, but if I spill my coffee, like it just ruined my entire day. Even though I could just brew another pot if I had to.
I get it.
But like it's my coffee. Like I love my coffee. So.
No, and it's funny that you mentioned like the palate expansion, right? So like for me, beer, I started with beer with Sam Adams at Applebee's on Staten Island. I just got tired of whatever else. I was like, I'll try something different. And so that's what sort of snowballed that. I don't know if we ever really talked about craft beer, but for a while I was doing a blog. We were doing a lot of traveling for it. I'm probably up to 6,000 different beers now. I stopped counting after 5,000.
Oh, wow.
Because that was enough. And part of the fun of that experience was developing a palate and learning, just all these different things. So it started with beer, and then the natural progression from there was bourbon and whiskey and, being able to tell the differences between rye and, barley-based stuff, whatever. The unexpected one was coffee. And I came to it, perhaps unsurprisingly, through beer. There's a brewery called Terrapin Brewing down in Athens, Georgia. And Terrapin had this, I'm trying to think of, I don't remember what I'm pretty sure it was them, because they had the Wake and Bake stout or porter or whatever. But they had this line, it was the same base beer, but it was brewed with different kinds of coffee from different regions. So there was Somalian coffee, there was something from South America, there was something from Southeast Asia. So it was really cool to taste these beers and know that the only difference was the coffee. And so that's what led me into like, oh, that would be fun. Like, I know there's coffee from all different regions. Let me check it out. And then when Heather and I took the kids on a cross-country road trip, 2018, I think, we went to Modern Times Beer in San Diego.
Okay.
And they're also a coffee place, a coffee roastery. And so we were able to get beer flights, but they also had coffee flights. And it was iced coffee.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first time I ever had bourbon barrel-aged coffee beans. And it was unbelievable. It's not, I don't know what people would expect it to be, but it was just so complex and rich and flavorful. It was amazing. There was no booze to it. There was just something about the flavor part of it.
Yep.
And so that's why I fell in love with them. And so again, it's the same way like people start out with like, maybe a Blue Moon is like a big fancy beer for them, but then they eventually get to the point where they're having all these like high-end IPAs and stuff. And then you go back and you have it and you're like, yeah, not so much.
Yeah.
So I get the Starbucks thing where like your palate have reached a certain point to that point, and now it's so far beyond that. So I think it's cool. Another thing I appreciate about you, the fact that like you can drink coffee for the flavor of it, the taste, and the pleasing experience of it instead of the caffeine burst or, loading it up with all kinds of shit that defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
So I have some other coffee related stuff I'll hit you up with off the air and some of those recipes
Of course.
for the nutrition side.
Yeah. And I've even, I've cut back onto the caffeine point. I've added decaf, so like I quasi make a half.
Yeah.
So which, it adds a different, like the decaf that I use has hints of chocolate and everything. So it really, using the two, to me it's a really good combination.
Yeah,
and you could pick up those subtle flavors when you just drink it black, as opposed to drinking it with milk and sugar.
And it's still new to me in terms of like the brewing process and everything for coffee. I didn't realize how important temperature was, like getting it to a specific temperature range. Mm-hmm. And Heather and I were in Stowe in November, and we went to this random coffee place. Best coffee I've ever had. It was unbelievable. And I was picking their brain because, again, they're doing like a slow drip sort of thing. And, just asking, well, why did you do it that way for that specific coffee versus this or that? So being the nerd that I am, I'm just excited to like have something new to learn or whatever. And I think that sort of like puts a good cap on it, right? Like for me, I'm very much a believer that we got one shot straight through this. I don't want to waste a second of it, right? Because there may not be, who knows what the hell comes after this, if anything.
Yep.
But if there's nothing, I want to at least be able to lay my head down at the end and know that I did everything I could, that I took full advantage of all of it. And so I love that you seem to be, similar mindset or whatever, and then being able to be adaptable, right? Like making those changes, even in something as simple as the half cap thing, right? Like, that's something that if anybody listening takes one thing away, it would be that. Like, be a little more forgiving with yourself, understand it's a process, try to just be a little bit better every day. And then when you look back a year from now, 10 years from now, you're going to be so much further along your path. You're going to be so much happier, hopefully, again, still work in progress there, right? But no, dude, this was so much fun. This was so great. I appreciate you coming along.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do another one. But thank you, Jon, for coming and hanging out. And thank you, everybody, for listening wherever and whenever you are.